father not caring how dirty she was as he held her and asking her if she was all right and where she had been before he decided to stand. "What is the meaning of this?" Lord Stark questioned as he looked around the pavilion and then at the king. "Why was I not told that my daughter had been found?" Hardly ever since he first met the North's warden did he see the man so angry, but it concerned his daughter, so it only made sense why he would take nothing lightly. "Why was she not brought to me at once? How dare you speak to your king in that manner?" Stefan's eyes swept across the room to glare at his mother, ready to pry his lips open and tell her she was being outrageous. His father didn't like her input neither. "Quiet, woman," he ordered fiercely, straightening in his chair. "I am sorry, Ned. I never meant to frighten the girl. It seemed best to bring her here and get the business done with quickly." "And what business is that?" His mother stepped forward to speak again, but Stefan spoke in time. "An incident happened at the banks of the Trident, Lord Stark." "An incident?" His mother repeated incredulously. "Stark's daughter attacked your brother, my son, her and her butcher's boy." "This isn't so small to be dubbed an incident, Stefan." Raising a brow, he wondered just how Joffrey managed to make her believe this story he made up. "And how would you know, mother? That isn't what happened at all. You weren't there, you only have hearsay." His mother quieted at that, most people shocked that he spoke to his mother so rudely. It was either be rude or let the lies fly, and he chose the former without regret. Lord Stark turned to look at him and then down at his daughter. "Prince Stefan is right, what the Queen and Prince Joffrey says isn't true. He had to come and stop Joffrey because he was hurting Mycah." His father looked at him, wanting some confirmation. "She says the truth," Stefan told him, knowing the question in his eyes. "That is not what Joff says. He says the Stark girl and the butcher boy beat him with clubs." Cersei continued on defending Joffrey. "His words were truth to her ears, that's why the boy was so spoiled. And what Joff says is a lie," Stefan countered, his voice growing much more taut at his rousing anger. He wasn't going to have Joffrey getting away with this, not now or ever. If he had to grow up and face things, then it was about time Joffrey did too, instead of hiding behind their mother's skirts. At least Myrcella took more responsibility than he did. They didn't even have clubs, they had broom handles. Joffrey came to taunt them and he unsheathed life steal on a little boy and a little girl thinking it was appropriate. "I came to stop him before he even dared to hurt Lady Arya and the butcher's boy." "You lie!" Joffrey shouted. "They both attacked me, and she threw Lion's Tooth in the river so I couldn't protect myself." It was obvious Joffrey wasn't even going to attempt to tell the truth about his part in it. Lion's Tooth wasn't even in his hand when Arya threw it in the river. The funny thing about it all is that Joffrey wouldn't even look Arya in the eye as he said it. If you were going to lie, then you must look someone in the eye to make it believable, but Stefan had reason to believe that Joffrey himself couldn't believe what he was spewing. He couldn't even act like he did. Arya, fed up with Joffrey's stupid tale, shook her head. "Liar!" she yelled, boldly as ever. "Shut up!" Joffrey, like a child her age, barked back. "Enough!" Stefan closed his eyes briefly, wanting pinch the bridge of his nose as his father roared and stood from his seat. This would have never have happened if Joffrey had minded his own business and left Mycah and Arya be. He should have just spent his time with Sansa. Why did he have to do something crazy and malicious? "Now, child, you will tell me what happened. Tell it all, and tell it true. It is a great crime to lie to a king." His king father looked over at Joffrey, trying to be fair. "When she is done, you will have your turn, and then Stefan. Until then, you hold your tongue, Joff." As Arya recounted the events from her perspective, the flap of the pavilion had parted and Sansa came walking in. Sansa kept her head bowed while Arya continued on, having got to the part where Joffrey's sword had been thrown into the trident, which made his uncle Renly laugh. Robert hadn't enjoyed the fact that his youngest brother took humor in. He turned his gaze to Selmy. "Sir Barristan, escort my brother before he chokes." Trying to stifle the laughter that didn't seem to want to go away, Lord Renly held out his hand to stop Sir Barristan. "My brother is too kind. I can find my way out myself." Bowing to Joffrey, he stood straight with his blue eyes laughing still. "Perchance later you'll tell me how a little girl the size of a wet rat managed to disarm you with a stick and throw your sword in the river." As Renly made his way to leave, Stefan had to hold his own laugh as Renly laughed again. Lion's tooth. He nearly cried. Joffrey was red in embarrassment and rage. Uncle Renly was not the only man who found all of this humorous, many others were snickering and trying to keep their laughs low. Stefan had saw his father send heated glares to them all, ready to kick them the whole lot of them out if they continued on. Now it was Joffrey's turn, spinning a giant web of lies upon lies. Stefan had to control himself for not interrupting every 5 minutes or rolling his eyes or sighing halfway through it. Their own father acted like he didn't even care. He was sure that the man didn't give two shits about this squabble. He looked like a blank wall, probably thinking about food and drink right about now. Stefan, his father, turned to him, that dull glaze leaving his eyes and focusing on him. Tell me what happened. I don't know the beginning, for I missed that much. When I arrived to the Trident, I had saw Joffrey pointing Lion's tooth at the butcher's boy. Arya had tried to disarm him, trying to knock the sword away to protect Mycah, and ended up hitting Joffrey on the head as she did. He had no problem lying about that last bit. If Joffrey and his mother could lie about their story for its entirety, then he could add one in his own. Then he turned his sword to Arya, and that's when I used my own to keep Joffrey's down. He proceeded to inform me that Arya hit him and called her a number of obscenities. Stefan looked down at Arya, who was smiling up at him, and he gave her a smile in return. Then I struck him. He made sure to look his father in the eye as he informed him that I was disgusted by his behavior and I hit him for it and told him to tell our mother what happened. Robert looked to Joffrey, who was fuming now yet managed to keep his tongue like their father warned. They weren't the only ones present, Ned told them. Sansa, come here. Tell us what happened. Stefan had reason to believe that Sansa wouldn't come to his defense. After all, she didn't like him much since he had struck Joffrey for his disgusting actions. Even now, she took her steps with hesitancy. She didn't look at all eager to speak. She looked to her sister first and then at Joffrey before she spoke. I don't know. Closing his eyes, he sighed and shook his head. I don't remember. Everything happened so fast, I didn't see. You rotten, shouted Arya, and before she could tackle her sister to the ground, Stefan picked her up to hold her back. Liar, 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 liar. She was kicking, trying her best to escape his grasp, but he held her tight, just not enough to crush her as he did. Arya, stop it. Her father shouted at her, but Arya was too deep in her anger towards her sister. Stefan hardly knew how to calm her down. He reasoned that she eventually would. Sansa stared at her little sister, whose hands resembled claws as she tried to swipe at her. The girl is as wild as that filthy animal of hers. Robert, I want her punished. Whipping his head to glower at his mother, he hurriedly looked to his father to see if he would submit to such extremities. Seven hells, his father said. Cersei, look at her. She's a child. What would you have me do, whip her through the streets? Damn it, children fight. It's over. No lasting harm was done. What does she need punishment for when she did nothing wrong, mother? Stefan demanded, not taking this lightly. It was Joffrey's fault and he's the only one that deserves punishment. He needs a lesson, and this was a good one. Fighting a little girl and then getting himself disarmed by one. He needs the discipline. Robert turned to look at him, nodded his head. Stefan and Arya's story match, and Stefan would never lie to me. He hasn't lied to me once in all his life, while Joff has told me several. Discipline your daughter as I discipline my son, Ned. This matter is done and dead. And what of the butcher's boy? His mother inquired, her taste for blood much too visible and making Stefan sick. He already had a plan for all this. It was set in motion before his mother spoke to him and right when he returned back to their camp. He wondered just how they would react to all of this. What he was about to say was bound to enrage his mother, but Joffrey even more. I will be taking care of the butcher's boy. I already knight him. The room was silent, swept away with shock. His mother blinked several times. You what? I knighted him. Stefan rocked back and forth between his heels and the tip of his toes, his hands clasped behind him. It would irate his mother more to act as if what he just done wasn't a power move. He pretended to be innocent, like he hadn't truly done something that completely took away all that she could possibly do to Mycah. He wanted to play a knight and so I made him one. I assure you, mother, he and the butcher were very upset. A lie, but a lie that must be told. In fact, the butcher was grateful and delighted and Micah was so happy. He was knight before half of the king's guard to bear witness and Stefan didn't mind doing the ritual over again before his father if need be. He was supposed to inherit his father's caste, but he will be my knight instead. When he is ready and proper, he will become a part of my king's guard. I assure you, I won't let him off easy. Micah being a part of the king's guard in the future had been a random plan, but one that would come the most use to him. Since he knew his mother had her own puppet strings within it, Stefan needed more than just Sabaristan. He would need to convince a few more of them and add more to his own if he wanted to shift the balance of power. Not only that, Sabaristan was getting quite old and couldn't be captain of the King's Guard forever. Whoever was next, it could be his uncle, and he didn't want that. It had to be someone who was undoubtedly on his side. The tension was thick, his mother was in complete and utter shock. It was because she knew Micah was untouchable to her now and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Others were shocked and others not so much because it would seem like an act of mercy, which indeed it was. Stefan was cunning in that aspect, but it would show others that Stefan believed in fair punishment and not the murder of children. Stefan knew appearances had to matter for all the things he planned to do. People will speak of these days where he spared the children of the lower class and surely gain him favors in the future. Micah's life did not solely hinge on what was right, but what was right that would come out of it for him being saved. His king father had lit up with amusement. Stefan could guess that his father did not see him doing something like this, and probably had the faintest idea as to why he did. His father may not be so strong with logic, but he could see moves mapped and why someone would do what that they did. It should have been seen to him that Stefan saved Micah on the principle of being kind and just than it was for anything else. What's done is done, the boy's been knighted. We're all bloody done with this now. Now we can all leave. Anxious as he was to his cup of wine in bed, he was sure his father thought this to be the best entertainment he was ever going to get for the night. Relieved that Joffrey nor his mother got their way, Stefan noticed that Arya had completely stopped her wriggling in his grasp. Her eyes were looking up at him big and shining. "You knighted Micah?" The way she asked was mostly of surprise, but there was awe in her voice. It made him feel wrong that she had not seen through him, that she was seeing the surface of it all. "You were amazing just now." "I did." Amazing. Stefan didn't like that person he had to become. This person that had to outgun his own mother and brother, to go through all this just to achieve the right things. How did it all come to this? Then he remembered it was because his mother was treacherous and nothing like the mother he always envisioned her to be. The mother that he always felt sorry for, the mother that turned out to be a cold woman that did not mind killing children, innocent, harmless children. Speaking of them, Joffrey had furiously pushed their mother's hand away as he stalked off. His mother was burning holes in the back of his head. He was sure his mother was going to tear into him for choosing strangers over his own family. Family became before everything else to her and it once did to him too. Ned Stark sent Arya and Sansa away with Jory, leaving the both of them in the empty pavilion. The silence lingered quite long, leaving Stefan finally being able to breathe, knowing that something could have possibly been wrong with his speedy actions. "You should have chose your mother, Stefan." Those words made the doubt in him grow into a large dark and grey cloud over him. He was so fixed on one-upping her, punishing her, that he hadn't realized that all of this could backfire on him or hollow he would feel using a child like this. He was so fixed on what he wanted to do and not at all of the outcome or how he would feel whilst doing it. "She is your queen mother, though she was rather harsh in her judgment now, she is still your mother most of all, but I thank you. I thank you for defending my daughter." His eyes slowly lifted to look at Ned Stark, a smile playing about his lips. "I chose justice, Lord Stark, that's all." Was this justice? Was it truly? Stefan found himself wondering, or was this just petty revenge he just did? It was nothing in the grand schemes of what he planned, but it felt like a kick to a lame lamb. "Besides, I'm quite taken with your youngest daughter. She's wild-spirited and good. I know the death of her friend would have been hard for her. It would have been hard for me as well. I don't have many friends, so I can't imagine what it feels to lose one. It must be something like this pain I feel right now, having to endure my sister being afar. The warden nodded understandingly and presented him a smile. You're quite an honorable lad, my prince. Honorable. It made him feel wrong to hear him be dubbed that. There was no honor and all the things he done. Stefan wanted to believe there was some honor in him, but from where? Honor was not inheritable in this family. His family was filled with people with tainted honor. You won't think that for long, Lord Stark. Stefan told him with light warning. Honor does not live in the south as it does so vigilantly in the north. It is not so important to everyone as it is to you, remember that. If Lord Stark thought he ruled as hand with honor, then he was a foolish man. A noble fool, a good-hearted fool, but a fool no less. You should learn that, because in the days to come, you're going to see how barbarous the South truly is. Robb. I'm starting to think my wife would rather be married to Rickon than to me. Even though it was said out of jest, Robb had half a mind to believe it. Rickon spent more time with Cassandra than he did, and she actively sought his company. And here he was, tray in hand, giving her the soup that the maester suggested she stay on until her coughing was cured. It was a job for servants, and yet he was using this minuscule task as an excuse for conversation. Robb nearly bent over backwards to please her, to give them amity, and she had turned away from him as if all his efforts were for naught. Even after comforting her after the fire, the distance hadn't lessened by the slightest margin. What did he have to do? What words did he have to say? Did he offend her? Did he do something wrong? What was it about him that made her want to avoid him at any moment possible? Why are you trying so hard? Theon dared to ask, brow quirked and his arms crossed as they walked slow enough to get where they were going and to properly talk privately. If she isn't willing, then you best start looking elsewhere to have your needs met. It didn't seem bizarre for his best friend to suggest he spend his time with a whore. It wasn't what he meant, what Robb had meant. He hadn't been worried about those needs. Not entirely, however. He enjoyed their coupling, hoped to do it again, but that wasn't the priority. He wanted to properly know her. He didn't even know what she liked other than those candied almonds. Rickon probably knew her favorite color already, and that was the sad thing. Is that really all you think about, Theon? I could actually want to know more about her, if you don't mind. In some ways, he did find himself offended that Theon suggested such a thing. Robb prided in himself in honor, and knowing very well what Jon endured as well as his mother's anger over the child made outside her marriage, he couldn't risk repeating his father's mistake. Robb worshipped his father, and yet he knew that following his footsteps exactly wasn't something he should want or be capable of. She likely doesn't really want to get to know you, so be done with it. She probably thinks she's better than us. Her handmaiden certainly thinks herself more highly than to the likes of me. Unsure of what he was going on about, Robb quirked an eyebrow. You mean Jocelyn? What would give Theon that impression of her? Robb knew her to be friendly and very polite. What Theon had against her didn't really make sense to him, but he was sure he was going to be given an explanation. She's the one the prince was fucking around the castle, and now she thinks she's too good for me. He should have suspected that. Perhaps Jocelyn had enough sense to know Theon wouldn't marry her and would just use her. If he did like her enough, she'd probably be a salt wife at best, since his friend believed in the traditions of old, marry the iron, mistress the other. The girl wasn't so foolish. Robb actually found himself commending her over the fact that she possibly knew better than to get herself involved with him. Theon may have been his best friend, but their ways of thinking didn't align all the time. Perhaps the next man she'll lay with would be the one she marries. The acting Lord of Winterfell decided to explain in her defense. Considering her chances of marriage are quite thinned. If kept quiet, she could possibly pass for a virgin. Most women lost their maidenheads to a number of things, horseback riding and so on, but if someone knew of her and the prince's former relationship, then she'd be named the prince's whore and be considered ruined all her life. He couldn't blame the girl for not taking risks on her slim chances now. Rolling his eyes to the ceiling, the ward shook his head. Marriage this, marriage that. He said disdainfully, why would anyone want to marry anyone when they don't even have to? Considering Theon himself had his own problems in that, being a hostage ward and still practically a heir, Robb could see why he was put off by it. You can all have it. I don't want it. Rob couldn't even begin to say that Theon might change his mind one day. Even if he did, there might be two suns in the sky. Finally reaching the bedchamber he now shared, Rob could hear talking from the other side of the door. Sounds like Rukan smirking. Theon tilted his head in amusement. Maybe you aren't so wrong as I thought. Shut up, will you? Squinting his eyes at him, he knocked twice to alert them of his presence before opening the door. Cassandra was sitting upright, hands clasped and her eyes crinkling, possibly finished laughing at whatever his little brother rambled on about. Rukan was sitting at the edge of the bed, grinning, before looking at him from over his shoulder. I hope I'm not interrupting. Rob hoped he was. He hoped his little brother would be leaving, wasn't his lessons around this time? Her eyes briefly looked at him before turning her attention back towards the youngest Stark. Perhaps another time, Rukan. I'd like to hear an end to this story. Come on, Rukan. Theon called to him, you ought to be with Maester Luwin anyway. Skipping out on lessons isn't good for a little lord. Grimacing upon remembering the time, Rukan gave her a hurried nod before running towards the door. Rob looked relieved, now alone with his wife. The Maester made me bring you some soup to cure your cough. Her face scrunched upon the mere mention of the soup, she even stuck out her tongue in disgust before turning her head away. I don't want it. The former princess told him without a second to waste. Give me bacon and fish, like any normal person eats in the morn. What a bull-headed girl. He affectionately thought, not giving in to her request and placing the tray before her. I can't do that. Rob urged, the Maester says soup. Rolling her eyes, Cassandra huffed in her slight tantrum before her eyes slowly looked down to gaze at the steaming dish. He half expected for her to push it away, to not let go of her resolve and continue to be as stubbornly childish as she was acting. If Rukan told her to drink it, she probably would. He could imagine his little brother giving her the simplest of words and his eyes big, willing her to listen, to smile even. She would have done it without argument, but now it was left to him since it was just the two of them now. After a minute's time and another reluctant sigh, she caved. Her hands wrapped themselves around the bowl, picking it up, and slowly drawing it to her lips. With another stare off, she practically chugged it down, drinking it in such a hurry, just to simply be done with it. Taking a seat where Rukan once was, he watched her finish the last bit with a frown and a wrinkle of her nose. I hate carrots, she said, her disgust etched on her entire face with her lips shining, making him want to laugh from the sight alone. Even with the sweet flavoring they still make themselves known, rude is what they are. This is the first time I ever heard someone call carrots rude. Rob joked, making her smile if only for just a few seconds before her eyes looked disdainfully back at the vegetables. Maester Luwin says they do something for the body, I don't really remember what exactly. Sight. Cassandra answered him, quickly at that. A healer once told me they are good for sight. Seeing how enthusiastic she seemed about saying it, his wife tried to quickly retract it and act as if she hadn't cared. Or something like that. She shrugged, keeping her eyes focused on the empty bowl. Unsure of whether it was the interest on his face that made her continue or because she actually wanted to talk about it, she continued. Beyond the narrow sea, they have food medicine. Certain foods help in certain ways and that's why the people live so long over there. What business does a princess have knowing of food medicine? Raising a brow, he watched her face contort into one of irritation, eyeing him and then softening just to see her was only poking fun. Her face always gave away how she felt, she didn't know how to mask herself. It was refreshing, her outward honesty, that is. He was sure that there were plenty of times she wished she wasn't so well read, especially towards him. The princess wasn't all that warm to him yet, and he supposed he would have to be patient. His wife tapped her lanky fingers against the sides of the wooden bowl, still stuck in her thoughts. For a second too long, she decidedly gave him her full attention. With a quirk of her lips, he was enlightened with a story. Stefan was sick once when we were younger. Little brats our Uncle Jamie would say since we used to like to give him trouble. Stefan was so tough, so brave even while sick. He was sweating and shaking all the time, but he told me we'd still play together and play pirates with Joffrey. For some reason, Rob thought that Joffrey was fitted for a pirate, ruthless, greedy, and believing everything they wished to claim was rightfully theirs. Joffrey liked being the captain and having me as his first mate. I had to be a boy though, never a girl first mate. Joffrey said it didn't fit. She snorted, rolling her eyes at the memory. Stefan was always the bad pirate, a rival of the sorts that Joffrey liked to beat. Joffrey kept crying and crying when Stefan couldn't play, and sometimes Stefan would lie to us by saying he was better just to play with us. Then one day, while we were playing in the middle of our war in the seas, he fainted and wouldn't wake up. Our mother and father tried to get any healer across Westeros to save him. Many came forward and none of them were able to wake him. We were almost afraid Stefan was lost to us for a while. By luck or by blessing, as I once believed, a traveling healer across the narrow sea arrived in King's Landing and decided to treat him. His treatment. He gave him foods. He said in order to coax a child to take medicine and let it work, you have to hide it within things he likes. So he fed Stefan all his favorites that mother named with medicine in them. It sounded unheard of, at least to Robb it did. Nobody in the north had done that. He didn't imagine Maester Luwin would suggest such a treatment. Though he supposed perhaps he was wrong, seeing as the Maester knew soup was a better diet for Cassandra's current condition. Stefan woke up and still kept taking the medicine. The healer claimed that Stefan was getting better with the food he ate, and because he was happier, his body was allowing the medicine to work. By a week's time, he was completely cured. My mother and father never been so happy, and I never saw Joffrey smile so happily like that before. I take it you and Joffrey aren't exactly close as you once were. Whether he was overstepping his boundaries, he wasn't sure. The look on her face had lost its light-heartedness entirely and took on a rather sad note. Her smile lacked the luster it just had, and her eyes closed halfway whilst staring absently at the empty bowl again. No, I'm afraid not. I could have done something to change that, really. Handing him the empty bowl, she laced her fingers together and rested them on her lap. I wasn't there for Joffrey when he needed someone, but I wasn't the someone he needed. He needed Stefan. I am the luckier out of 3, less lucky than Tommen and Myrcella, but the luckiest of the eldest children. My father isn't hard on me or holds many responsibilities over my head as he does them. Our father is harsh on them both and expects a great deal from them. Stefan knows that better than anyone else, and yet he did not see Joffrey's suffering. So Joffrey endured it alone when Stefan had me. Since we're twins we relied on each other, but Joffrey needed his older brother than he did his older sister. Even though Robb and Joffrey had their differences, he felt sorry for him, just a bit upon hearing it through this perspective. While he had expectations of being Lord of Winterfell, their father wasn't exactly harsh as he imagined a king would be their prince sons. The expectations had to be on a higher tier than his own, and while Joffrey was only second in line, it still mattered. It still was a big responsibility. I don't think Stefan really knows just how much Joffrey looked up to him. He probably still does. Stefan is always so busy that he isn't aware of anything. Lowering his head, he fiddled with his gloves as he thought more about it. It made him forget how impressionable it was to be an older sibling, and it made him feel guilty for not being more focused on Bran. If only he hadn't encouraged his climbing or was much more strict, then none of what happened would have occurred. Though he supposed it didn't matter since Bran's fall was starting to look less and less like an accident after the assassination attempt that nearly killed his brother, mother, and his wife. How are you feeling? Seeing as this conversation wasn't exactly good for her mind, he decided to change the topic by shifting to herself and not the family she missed. Not only was he reminding her of a different time, he was allowing his own self to feel guilty about something he couldn't change. Fine, I suppose. It sounded like a lie from how she said it. She turned her head, eyes staring out at the windows into the morning of the north. I want to get out of here. Out of Winterfell or out of this room? He was unsure. And what is out of here, princess? Robb asked, making Cassandra slowly turn her head to give him back her attention. We can go for a walk, if you want to. I would, like that. Hesitant as she was, she agreed to it. It would be the first time in days she decided to be alone with him. His face eased into a smile, hoping that this would be the first step into forming a proper relationship. LLL. Since he did not prepare for her to actually say yes, Robb didn't have anything in mind to speak about. After giving her a piece of her home and family life, sad it might have been, he tried to think of things that would lighten the mood and keep her mind far away from those things. When he needed a distraction, he would come to the godswood and pray, and seeing as she did not share his gods, he didn't think she would enjoy that all too much. And yet when his feet led them there, his wife didn't seem displeased. In fact, she smiled upon laying her eyes on the heart tree. To think it wasn't that long ago that they had married in front of the old gods. This very place they swore themselves to one another and were still unsure of what the future might bring, bliss or chaos. Even now, the both of them were still unsure, but Rob liked to think the former was what would be given to them. In most aspects, Rob liked his wife. Even if he didn't know much about her, she wasn't rude or cruel. How exactly did she feel about him was a mystery within itself. Her constant pushing and random pulling had him feeling like he was never truly bound to find out. After all her pushing, she was pulling again, and who was to say the next time she pushed, she would want him to stay there? "I find it oddly beautiful," she said to him, her eyes staring at the face of the weirwood. "I used to be scared of them when I was younger when the Septa brought me to the Godswood in King's Landing to teach me about the old gods. She didn't speak highly of them, you should know why, I presume. You were scared." It wasn't surprising, he too felt uncomfortable staring at such a thing when he first laid eyes on them. However, it drew him in, strangely. The old Odsk seemed to call him, speaking to him in their hushed whispers. He couldn't find himself giving his faith to the seven after the first time he heard their advice in the winds. "I suppose she wouldn't since she is devout to the seven. Isn't that normal of a child? Never seeing a face on a tree before and then seeing a tree with a face and bleeding eyes." Smiling, he told himself not to laugh just in case it would offend her. "I was most definitely afraid." Slowly tilting her head back, her eyes roamed away from the face and towards the bright leaves. He found himself unable to tear his eyes away, the setting was all too bewitching. The stark look was always fair skin and dark hair, which his wife seemed to possess. He had the look of Tully, but his wife looked like she truly belonged in the north. Under these leaves of blood red, she looked as if she truly belonged here, more than he ever did. She could give their children the look of his father and forefathers. For some reason, Rob couldn't help but feel all too eager about that. "Have you ever wavered in your faith?" It was such an odd question, odd enough to make him stop gawking at her before she noticed. Cassandra wanted to know the most random things about him, but religion was probably important, he assumed. "Sometimes," Rob admitted, shifting his focus to the leaves that hung on the branches stretched out above them. "I wavered when learning of Bran's fall and what became of him." From the corner of his peripherals, he saw her nod. "I've questioned the seven too about a lot of things. Never strong enough to give them up, but enough they might think I'm not so devout." "How could you not be when you nearly prayed all through the night?" If anyone was so religious, Rob knew it to be her. He never heard of an all-night prayer and yet she came here and promised to do just that for his little brother she barely knew. She believed so strongly in the seven then, he would have never thought she turned the slightest bit of her back to them. Her arm, still wrapped around his, had loosened its hold. "And yet the mother did not help your brother, now did she?" He still lay asleep and broken. "She did nothing to protect him or bring him back." Letting her arm slip away from him and fall to her side, she took a step towards the moss-covered bench and took a seat. He hadn't guessed she was still so torn about Bran's condition, considering she had not come to visit him since these recent events. He didn't fault for her for it. It was difficult for everyone to stay in the sick room just to watch him just sleep. "As much as I hate to say it," taking a seat beside her, he let out a sigh as he stared at the pool before them, "we must be patient. All good things come in time, as my parents like to say." With an inelegant snort, Cassandra turned her head to laugh. "My mother and father could never abide by that. They are both so impatient." "And neither could you," Rob stated, watching her head whip to face him. Cassandra seemed so annoyed by him saying that, her smile turned to a frown in a matter of seconds. "You're not so patient either." "I am so." There was a lack of fight in her voice, making it look as if she had a hard time believing that herself. "Just as you were patient to not stuff yourself full of candied almonds." His eyes caught her cringing before quickly schooling her expression and bringing her hand hard on his arm with a slap. Not enough make the boy yelp, but enough to make him instantly soothe it with a rub from the slight sting. Enough. Are you never going to let me hear the end of that? It was just one time. Finally, it felt like the two could laugh and breathe without any awkward tension becoming between them. For a moment, he could see his wife as a friend and not some princess he had been made to marry so quickly out fulfillment their fathers had about close houses. For once, he was looking at Cassandra, not Lady Cassandra Stark or Princess Cassandra Baratheon. The stillness of the Godswood had always brought him peace, even more so now as he had someone to enjoy it with him. The wind would ruffle the branches of the trees, giving the surrounding area of prayer a song for them. The quiet would be interrupted now and again by his voice or hers, leaving their laughs echoing all around. It made him feel so strange to find happiness during such a time like this, and he knew it wouldn't live but for so long. The conversations that began and ended were all that could be considered childish. What games they would play in the north and the south, what they liked to do when they had time away from their studies and away from their siblings. He found out Cassandra liked to draw, which surprised him since he didn't see her doing much of that while she was here. She even promised to send Tommen and Myrcella some drawings should she explore more of the north. It hadn't at all surprised her that he liked swordplay, practicing with a lance whether it was by himself or with another. She said Stefan was the same and even admitted that her twin liked to paint whenever he thought nobody would bother him. Just imagining the Crown Prince with a paintbrush and a canvas struck Rob as odd, but Cassandra assured him that if he were to have ever see it, he would find it fitting. "I should buy a Mirish lens and make you watch the stars with me," she said, looking down at her feet that was adorned with black boots to keep her warm from the cold and eventually able to walk through the snow that was bound to fall and pile soon. "Do you know much about them?" "I know everything there is to know." "Only a few things." He shrugged, never once taking interest in a matter of the twinkling lights that only shone themselves in the night. "I never caught the interest." "I'll show you why you should." Her confidence didn't at all surprise him. The stars should never be ignored. They can tell of the future, and I think everyone deserves to have a little insight of the days of new. Before Rob could explain that knowing the future wasn't always a good thing, Maester Luwin came to enter the Godswood, his hands hidden beneath his large sleeves as he made their way over. He bowed his head once the both of them were aware of him, but it was Cassandra that quickly brought herself to her feet. "Maester, is there any news of my good mother?" His lips curled into a smile as his wife quickly made her worries for his mother known. "Lady Stark is in no danger, Princess. When she is more than able, I'll be sure to have you see her. If I may, could I speak to your husband in private?" Furrowing his brows, Rob looked to the Maester with question, and Cassandra seemed quite puzzled as well. Her head slowly turned to look at him before giving him the slightest of bows and taking her leave. He didn't have the chance to hold her to say that Cassandra should be allowed to hear whatever the Maester had to tell him. That's what his father would have done for his mother. Since it was already too late, Rob made himself to stand. He couldn't help but feel there was something urgent about this business and that they would be made to leave once he was told of the details. "What is it, Maester Luwin?" "Your mother wishes to speak with you." When Luwin said his mother was fine, he didn't inform him that she had woken. His mother slept for 4 days since the incident with Bran. She deems it urgent. Then I will go to her. Before he could hurry himself to his mother's side, the bony hand of the Maester halted him. "What? You said she deems it urgent." "She will be making her way here, my lord." Confused as to why his mother wanted to speak here, Rob tried to think what could be so important that she'd rather it stay in private in the Godswood. This was not the place of his mother's worship, but it was a quiet place. A place where secrets could be said and not be discovered, he soon put together. Soon they were approached by Sir Roderick, and then Theon came after him. None of them held the knowledge of what his mother wanted to speak with them about, and that made his worry twice as strong. By the time his mother had arrived, Rob had felt pity. Her fingers wore bandages still, and she looked paler than she ever looked before. She was a woman still coming to terms from what happened days ago, while her own son had been pursuing such frivolous things like closeness to his wife. "What I am about to tell you must remain between us." His mother broke the silence, and somehow, the Godswood had felt so much more eerie to him. He was tense, unsure, and afraid of what his mother was going to say. "I don't think Bran fell from that tower." Her eyes looked at each and every one of them. "I think he was thrown." With wide eyes, he immediately stared at his mother in disbelief. Throne. Her words repeated in his head over and over as he tried to come to terms of this bold accusation. The boy was always sure-footed before. Lewin seemed to agree as he told that to Sir Roderick. Someone tried to kill him twice. Why? Whether it was anger or sorrow, Rob was unsure of why his mother's voice trembled. He found anger seething within him, starting like a flame before it spread through him like wildfire. Why murder an innocent child? Unless he saw something he wasn't meant to see. Saw what, my lady? Theon asked. I don't know. His mother answered, but I would stake my life that the Lannisters are involved. We already have reason to suspect their loyalty to the crown. Now his throat felt taut. Lannisters. For one, his wife was half a Lannister. Did his mother believe she could be involved in this as well? Confused, he kept himself silent. His mind was becoming a mess as he tried to push away any sort of thought that would connect Cassandra into all of this. Did you notice the dagger the killer used? Sir Roderick pointed out, holding the weapon within his hands. It's too fine a weapon for such a man. He unsheathed it first, letting their eyes behold the sight of pure Valyrian steel that shined when shown. The blade is Valyrian steel, the handle dragonbone. After such a brief description, he sheathed the sword back in its scabbard. A weapon like that has no business being in the hands of such as him. Someone gave it to him. What if it were true? All arrows seemed to point it true. He was enraged, unable to control himself now. They come into our home and try to murder my brother. This couldn't be forgotten. This could not be left without the hand of justice being given. Why not let me take the dagger and let Cassandra see it? Surely, she could inform us of whom it would belong to. His mother pondered the idea before closing her eyes, giving a shake of her head. And what if she knows and tells us a lie? This is her family, Rob. As much as I want to believe Cassandra be not involved in this, she would want to protect her family, would she not? She holds a love for them far greater than she could feel for you. But he was her husband. Bran was her brother now, and they, the Starks, were her family now too. She was cloaked and given their name. They swore in front of the gods for the love of all things right. Would she truly turn a blind eye to those, family or no, that would bring an end to a child? Rob had thought her too highly of that. Then what do we do, mother? Do we give them war? If it's war they want. War. Against his wife's own family. Did it really have to go that far? And would she turn on him? Go running back to her Lannister family and leave him behind? His best friend sided with him on this. Theon took a step forward, a step towards him in a means to prove his undoubted loyalty. You know, if it comes to that, I'll stand behind you. Yet the Maester made sure they would perish the thought. What? He said questioningly, calm as he always was. Is there going to be a battle in the Godswood, HM? Too easily words of war become acts of war. We don't know the truth yet. The truth? Yes, he supposed the man was right. They did not know the truth. Rob was being reckless now, he realized. Turning his attention away from him, Lewin focused his eyes back to his mother. Lord Stark must be told of this. Catelyn seemed quite unsure about the matter of how such words should be presented. I do not trust a raven to carry these words. I'll ride to King's Landing. Rob quickly offered, and I'll take Cassandra with me and make it seem we come to visit. Nobody would suspect a thing, would they? Although she hasn't been away home for long, it would be seen as the princess was eagerly homesick. Nobody would question that. No. His mother rejected the idea, smiling since she understood what he tried to do. There must always be a Stark in Winterfell. I will go myself. Mother, you can't, as if that were a better decision. His mother going to the lion's den. She had to be mad to suggest that. I must. The woman insisted, almost fiercely. When his mother was that stubborn, you couldn't convince her of anything else. Turning his head away, not liking all of what was happening and panning out, Rob was unsure of how he was supposed to deal with all of this. I'll send Horlis with his guardsmen to escort you. Roderick suggested, knowing the safety of his mother was paramount if what she suspected was actually true. Too large a party attracts unwanted attention. I will not have the Lannisters know that I am coming. Knowing the measure, she thought clearly on how she wanted this done despite how on the spot the decision was. Then let me accompany you at least. Sir Roderick insisted. King's Road can be a dangerous place for a woman alone. She really decided to leave, to venture to danger, and Rob couldn't believe it. Even the Maester agreed to this ludicrous plan. What about Bran? Rob questioned, his voice holding all his pent-up feelings and utter confusion. He was Lord of Winterfell now and all of this was happening under his nose and out of his control. I have prayed to the Seven for more than a month. His mother told him, her sad eyes looking steadily into his own. Bran's life is in their hands now. Though he knew it true, he wanted his mother by Bran's side. That's what Bran needed, her. I want your oaths. She demanded, all of their eyes drawn to hers. If even part of what I suspect is true, Ned and my girls have ridden into deadly danger, and a word in the wrong ears could mean their lives. Lord Eddard is a second father to me, Theon informed her, unwaveringly so. I do so swear. You have my oath. Maester Lewin gave a nod as he tugged at the chain around his neck. And mine, my lady. Sir Roderick consented solemnly. Now his mother's eyes laid on him, and how could Rob keep this secret? His wife could have been the key of getting the truth squared away, and his mother wanted to make this the very first secret in his newly marriage. And you, Rob. He wanted to tell her no, that they could go about this way differently. But with the way she was looking at him, pleading with the eyes they shared in color, he couldn't do it. So he gave her a nod, a silent one. One that gave confirmation to this oath. For now, Rob was going to keep his little brother safe. If there had been one killer, then others could be bound to arrive. He put one man in the sick room day and night, one outside the door, and two at the bottom of the stairs. Not a single person would be allowed to see him without his permission now. Stefan. You would think a person would be happy to come back home after being away for a few months. Stefan, however, felt all but numb about it. So what if he was back in King's Landing? He had no happiness, just qualms about returning here. It should have made him pleased to be back in own home, sleeping in his own bed again, able to do all the things he usually did, but it was nothing to him now. Every bit of this castle had secrets upon secrets about his family, and they were slowly unraveling now that he was aware of them. All families have secrets, don't they? But were their secrets as lethal as his? Probably. Not every family was a happy one. Not everyone could have a family like the Starks, Stefan supposed. His newly knight, Micah, followed him obediently as they walked. The boy was quick to say a yes and seemed to be slowly easing into his new role quite nicely. Since he was so young and should have to do it properly, he would act as page and squire until he was of 4 and 10. The boy was still young, but Stefan found him promising. Although Micah's rescue had been for his own personal gain, Stefan was truly glad that there was something good that Micah was finding in all of this. I suppose you know your training won't be easy, Micah. Making conversation, the redhead boy immediately lifted his head, eyes compliantly meeting his out of politeness. I know, my prince. The boy said quietly, but I am willing. Trust me, I am. Whether if it was because his heart was tender or he just liked seeing someone of strong will, Stefan believed his words. 7 is the starting age of most pages, but you are 11, that doesn't give you any slack, you must remember that. You will have to work thrice as hard. He began to explain as they continued to climb up the steps of the Red Keep. You'll be older than most of your peers, but the lord I assigned you to will treat you well. He will assign you to falconers and huntsmen, he will choose the maesters that you will learn from. Might I ask who the lord be, my prince? Lord Renfred Reitke. One of the few lords of the Crown lands he happened to get well acquainted with. It was due to Renly that Stefan knew of him and had the chance to meet him, but by asking this favor of him, he knew the Lord of Duskendale would one day come to ask something in return. That was the price that Stefan was willing to pay one day. All favors were met with favors in the south. He is a good man and will take care of you well. I mind you to beware that he is strict and does not like to repeat himself, not ever. If he tells you something once, best pray you remember it. Other than that, when you're not with him, you will assist the other men of the Kingsguard. My uncle will make sure you carry and clean their armor, take care of their horses, and pack their baggage. It was a lot, especially for a newly made page, but the Crown Prince had some faith that Micah could do it. Possibly because the boy had no choice but to now. He was already knighted, but he had to go through the process like anyone else if he wanted him perfectly fit for the Kingsguard. People would already accuse Stefan of favoritism by choosing a commoner. He couldn't be soft on him now. If you're lucky and don't step on anyone's toes, you'll get to go on expeditions and receive swordsmanship by those that find you worthy. You have a lot to learn, Micah. I apologize, you'll have to learn it all so quickly. No apologies, my prince. I am all but eager. I always wanted to be a knight, I know the costs. Smiling, Stefan gave a slow nod. Good, you'll be sent straight away to Lord Riker by first light. Tell Arya and your father your goodbyes as you make preparations. Micah separated from him, possibly to tell his father of the news and spend time with him as Stefan suggested. Now he was left alone. Aside from Silver at his heels, he could finally deal with the emptiness, the red keep that he suddenly felt. Cassandra wasn't here, and the first place his feet found himself going was to her room, just to find it neat as the day she left it. Well, she didn't leave it neat. The girl was such a slob. The servants had to fix the place as they always did, or else he would have found dresses littering the floor, shoes to trip over, and open books on every desk, table, and whichever surface that they could be laid on. His eyes looked around, smiling as he did, before walking towards the balcony. Her room faced the ocean, which she loved so much, while he could see Flea Bottom and Dragon Pit from his. When she was first given this room when they were 5, when their father found it unnatural for them to share their room any longer, she had been so happy that she could see the ocean and the ships after all her crying about how she didn't want to separate. Cassandra was still the same in that regard. She cried about parting with him for her new family, but he was sure that she would be happy about remaining in Winterfell eventually. Feels strange to see it empty, doesn't it? Stefan hadn't moved from his place. His head remained gazing out at the ocean waters while his uncle came ambling through. Jaime leaned against the railing of the balcony as he did, looking out in the distance as well. I'm going to miss that girl. I suppose I already do. As much as he didn't want to speak with him, Stefan knew he couldn't just outright ignore him. It would be too suspicious on his part, especially considering now of all times. So he would play the lonely brother, the nephew that needed consolation. Perhaps he might learn something if he did. You're going to miss her giving you hell. She didn't give me hell all the time. Smiling, he shook his head. She was the one good distraction I had from watching that father of yours like a wet nurse watches a babe. I thought my mother was the better distraction in your regards. The quip left him before it was too late to change it or take it back. Luckily for him, Jaime didn't understand the double meaning. I can't rely on your mother all the time, now can I? Setting his jaw, Stefan eyed his uncle vehemently from the corner of his eyes. Your mother tells me you've been quite the ass to her as of late. He nearly forgotten just how close they once were. How he could be honest with his uncle, never holding back what he wanted to say. And now? Now he couldn't be as blatantly honest as he used to anymore. Is it because you miss Cassie? Is that why you saved that little swine-bathed boy? All in efforts to spite your mother. I believe she overreacted about the whole thing too, but going against her isn't very much like you, nephew. With a snort, he pushed himself away from the railing and turned to his uncle, forcing himself to smile. Really? I didn't notice I was behaving that way. Why was his mother and uncle watching him as of late? Neither one could be onto his motives, his intentions, so why were they studying him? Was he behaving that suspiciously, or maybe their own paranoia of not getting caught on so many levels was making them watch everyone so closely nowadays? I miss my sister, dearly, but that's not the reason why I saved the butcher's boy, uncle. I'm just against putting a blade to a child is all. Unlike you, who could push a boy from a tower. Murderer. Was what he spat in his mind. Kingslayer. Childslayer should be said all the same. To think he once thought his uncle was deserving of such a title. He should have been given far worse names. When did you get so soft of heart for children, Steph? I've never seen you so. Jaime paused, brow quirked and head tilted, passionate about life. Since I became an older brother. Once before, he thought of what if someone did to Tommen what they had done to Bran. He seethed at the thought. Honestly, if someone dared to push Joffrey like that, Steffon would still be as fiercely protective and righteously angry. No matter how shaky things were between Steff and Joff, he would never allow someone to hurt him. He still felt some pangs of guilt over what transpired at the Trident. Now that the high of vengeance was cooling down, he found himself not liking the route he had taken. Their father once beat Joffrey before because he cut open a kitchen cat that had a swollen belly filled with kittens. Their king father tried to beat the sense into him, and it was Steffon who shielded him while their mother begged for Robert to stop. Steffon could remember Joffrey's cries and how he trembled in his hold, how Joffrey held him to be his shield and to protect them. Back then Steffon had felt the brunt of their father's anger, the slaps and screams whenever he had done something wrong just by a slip. Steffon loved his father and still did, but even he knew that all of what he would do wasn't right. I became like that too when Tyrion was born. He heard his uncle say as he pulled himself out of flashes of the past in his mind's eye. Steffon raised his eyes to look at his uncle, who seemed to be going back to those times as well. Your mother wished he would die ever since he was brought into this world, but everything in me wanted to protect him. Even now, both of us grown, I still want to protect my baby brother. That was the last thing he wanted to hear, humanity in someone he wanted to hate. Something good out of the mouth of someone who was deceiving and committing wrongs. Steffon was well aware of the close relationship that his uncles had, and he had always admired such a thing since he wished the same could be said between him and Joffrey. At least his relationship with Tommen was still good. Hopefully, he could still protect Tommen from this world and all the cruel people as well as dangers within it. Turning away from him, Steffon looked back out at the horizon. This conversation still didn't temper the anger in him or the impulsive actions quickening in his head. Ned. The council meeting brought him no pleasure down from the company and to the state of the South. All he had learned had made his head ache and kept his mind busy when it should have been in sound rest once he was far away. Even when he was rid of Renly, Varys, Littlefinger and Pycelle, he felt their presence stuck to his clothes like an awful stench. They were silhouetting all around him in such a vulgar kind of way. Just to think he would have to deal with them for long had him sighing so heavily that he thought his lungs might collapse from all the air that left him. Last he heard of the king was that he rode through the city with Ser Barristan riding beside him. What surprised him was that Steffon decided to skip out on such an important appearance, knowing very well the crown prince should have shown his face to the people. His people. He noticed the boy wasn't himself, or at least the self he seen him to be for the short time they spent on the road together. The boy was quiet more often than not and always walking somewhere with a purpose. Even now, he couldn't find the boy where he need be. Ned couldn't help but to find the boy's sudden disappearances suspicious. Knowing that looking and finding what the boy took himself busy of should have been his priority, he instead met with the boy by chance. By stroke of luck, he saw the golden-haired stag speaking to a cloaked man. "Thank you for retrieving this for me." And with a pouch with gold pieces surely within it, he dropped it in the palm of the man's hand and unrolled the parchment to read its contents. Normally, Ned would have dismissed for a letter that he had no business knowing the contents, but with the way the boy had been sly as of late, he was unsure if he could simply ignore it all. As if he knew he was being watched, Steffon turned to face him and gave him a small smile. He did not look startled and nor did he seem displeased. He looked as if he had nothing to hide, and for that, Ned let his suspicions die for a moment. "Did you just leave your very first council meeting, Lord Stark? Tell me, what is it all that you dreamed?" With a titter, Ned crossed his arms. "How well do you know what is going on under your father's rule, my prince?" "I know well enough," he replied in aloof, rolling the letter back at up. "I know my father likes to spend coins than count them. I know he's probably plotting to hold a tourney for you, he loves them. Tourney for the hand. It's really for him, not for you. I know that Littlefinger and the Spider love their runarounds and false courtesies. I know my uncle Renly makes a joke and jibe out of everything and to everyone. Oh, did the Maester fall asleep? He did, didn't he? He does that quite a lot." The sarcasm might have been as visible as the sun, but the truth shone brighter. The Crown Prince was not ignorant of his father's folly. At least Ned didn't have the groom the boy to know what was wrong and right in that part of court. You know all of this and didn't wish to warn me. He wasn't angry, he just wondered why the boy kept it all to himself. Stefan was good, he reasoned. He was sure the boy would at least warn him of this catastrophe. I wanted you to see how much chaos is really here and assess it for yourself. Understanding his point, the Lord of Winterfell gave a nod. Also, would you have believed me? You wouldn't think my father would be that reckless, now would you? Another good point. Robert was hardly the man he remembered or the king he hoped he would be. I could give you advice now if you'd like. And what advice would that be, Prince Stefan? The smile that had remained on his face faltered and his brows bowed to show his seriousness. In a matter of minutes, the boy transformed, just like he had several shades in the pavilion in the defense of Arya. You trust no one, especially not Baelish. That man is a snake in the form of a man. He thought he was going to hear something more sinister about Varys, by his surprise. He only works for what is best for him. Believes me when I say this, Lord Stark, watch him, play his duel of words and games, but do not lower the sword. Never lower the sword and keep it at his neck. Just what had Littlefinger done to provoke such distrust in the Crown Prince? You would think Petter would try his best to remain on the boy's best side since he was the future king. I believe you were made aware that my uncle Stannis is not here. I just received word from him that he wants me to come to see him in Dragonstone. Odd. It was truly odd that Stannis wanted his nephew to travel to see him, and it was obviously because he did not trust any words to be carried by a raven. Just what could Stannis want his nephew to know after he fled like this? Why did Stannis flee in the first place? Hopefully Arya gets to spend time with her friend before he goes to Duskendale. Stefan quickly informed him, satiating his curiosity as to what the butcher's boy was currently doing. I might be away for a month or so, but when I come back, I hope to see you haven't fallen into the pit of our good old southern chaos, Lord Stark. And with that, the prince had left and Ned wondered just what was going on. Everyone was having a hidden agenda, cryptic messages, and he felt like he was in a sea of vipers. Just what the hell was going on in King's Landing? Cassandra. Something was off. The way Robb looked at her now was not the same it was before. In fact, he had been quite distant from her as of late, and she found it most troubling. Since the day they had met, he had been the one to initiate everything, whether it be for them to spend time together or just simply speaking. Now he did nothing, said not one word, or even took a chance to glance her way. This all began ever since his mother had woken from her medicine-induced slumber that Cassandra discovered a day ago. The day after she left Robb in the Godswood to speak to the Maester alone, he told her the very next day what became of her good mother. He informed her of the wounds the woman suffered through were deep, near the bone, to the point he made her drink milk of the poppy and had her sleep in peace while he tended to her. She was completely free of feeling the pain in her fingers. It made sense and it worried her some, but he continued to instill that the woman was fine and did not need her fretting. Cassandra didn't have a clue how to approach the woman when she would wake. In fact, when she did awake, Cassandra wasn't even told right away. Jocelyn had come to tell her that Lady Catelyn wished to see the Maester, Sir Roderick, Theon, and Robb in the Godswood during the day she left Robb and Lewin. Cassandra couldn't help but to find that unsettling. That's when Robb changed. It all could have been in her head. That was a possibility, and yet she didn't think she was just fabricating all of this. What could have happened in that meeting to make him so similar to stories of winter nights? Cold and making the heart feel lonely, longing for some proper warmth, even if it was just a flickering and single flame. In her days here, Cassandra could compare Robb to one of the brightest things in her current life, and that's why she tended to shun him. He was blinding in that kind of way, and now she was longing to be bathed in his presence, even if it was just for a short while. It could have been her own childish arrogance of not liking to be ignored as well. Even she, herself, found how moody she was annoying at times. Rickon still came around with Shaddydog at his heels during his visits. Shaddydog was quite the hostile thing, but she was sure the direwolf was growing used to her presence by now. It still didn't mean Rya and Shaggy got along. The two often seized another up, and Rickon tried to placate his companion, and she had done the same with hers. The intensity in their meetings, like lions and wolves, was starting to remind her of her own family against the Starks. Wondering if Rob would return late into the night again, she made herself a cup of tea to enjoy and keep herself awake for a few more hours. Instead of just worrying about the distance between her and her husband, she knew it would be wiser to try to ask him about it. Rob was always kind to her before, offering explanations here and there, so why not now? Why should she be so fearful to question his moods? What was she truly afraid that he would tell her? An hour or so she guessed passed, leaving her sinking into the bed and fighting against the boredom of the quiet room. Here she was, lying in bed alone, with Raya chewing at the steak bone she left meatless hours ago. The lion was quite content in her own bed, not caring that Rob or Grey Wind had come when they should have. Perhaps the animal had the right idea of not caring, just having they'll come when they come kind of attitude. Raya. The lioness paused mid-bite upon hearing her name and raised her head to look up at her master. Cassandra patted the empty space to her left, allowing the lion to lay herself atop of the furs beside her. Placing the bone down on her cot, she did as her master wanted and laid down next to her side. At least she could cure some of her boredom by petting the soft, pristine fur of the lion while she waited for Rob's return. I bet he doesn't think I'm asleep yet. He's probably not going to show up until midnight. Talking to herself or talking to Raya? Cassandra had no clue. What is his problem anyway? What did I do to deserve to be ignored? The Rakar purred under touch, enjoying the mindless scratching of her fingers, and not really listening to her. She could feel soft paws, padding against her arm as the lion rolled on its back and tried to lick her limb. Why should I care anyway? I've done the same to him too, haven't I? I've avoided him constantly, for days. Frowning, her hands stopped mid-petting as her shoulders drooped. Is this how he felt? Would he wait for me just to see I didn't care if he did or not? I'm a terrible wife. The sudden thought came to her, her frown growing deeper and the guilt blossoming strongly. It's not like I wanted to be his wife anyway, but I could at least been a bit kinder. Couldn't I? The door suddenly opened, yanking her from her thoughts due to how startled she was. Rob strode in, eyes drooping and shoulders slacked. He seemed so tired and unlikely to even begin to want a conversation. Raya sat up to see Grey Wind following after him. Rob shut the door once the wolf was in and immediately began to rid himself of his cloak. The silence was uncomfortable. The room was empty of conversation and the only sounds were the sounds of his straps unloosening and the lazy thump of him piling his clothes on the nearby chair. It was like he didn't have the energy to properly his clothes away, which was odd since Rob was neater than she could ever be. Raya jumped down, walking to sniff Grey Wind just to find the wolf eyeing her as she circled him. At least he hadn't changed, not like Rob had in this short span of time. Your duties have kept you busy. Small talk was what it was, at least it was a start. She could try to begin with this or just wait until tomorrow to ask him about his curious behavior towards her as of late. Yes, my lady. Her brows instantly furrowed at how monotone he sounded, like he didn't even want to speak. My lady. Rob never said that to her before. It was also her first name or wife. Never my lady. With a tunic and loose pair of sleeping trousers, he climbed into bed and laid down with his back turned towards her with the blankets and furs brought to his chin. Now she knew she wasn't imagining all of this. This wasn't just something her mind was conjuring, this was entirely real. Clenching her fists, Cassandra sunk her teeth into her bottom lip as she contemplated on whether she should pursue this tonight or not. She wanted to, she prepared herself to, but he seemed so tired, like he didn't want to be bothered. Rob. His name spilled from her lips without another thought coming across her mind. Before she could count that he might have been tired from his newly Lord's Day work, she already decided not to mind his current mood. Yes. He answered her, still turned away, but obviously informing her that he was listening. How is your lady mother? Her eyes observed the way he seemed much more still upon her question. I was not informed she had awoken. Is there something wrong? Perhaps his mother was the root of all of this. Her husband did not utter another word, just staying still. Her patience was wearing thin and she had half a mind to yank him to face her. Does that trouble you? Confused by his question and annoyed he was giving her a runaround, she tried to keep herself civil as possible. She is my good mother, she nearly had her life taken from her, of course I am troubled that I was not made aware she is awake. Slowly, he made himself sit up and turned himself to look at her, his blue eyes scanning all over her face. Why was he looking at her like that? With suspicion. It aggravated her and left her muddled. Tell me, when the fire happened, did you really not sense anything amiss? They hadn't spoken of the fire since it happened and now he was curious about it. I didn't. Cassandra slowly raised a brow, alarmed by what the meaning of this topic meant. I thought I was by myself when Jocelyn left me. When I went to close the door, that vile man upon accident pushed a book out of its shelf. That's how I realized he was there and we fought, and then he locked me in after pushing the candle to start the fire. Why are you asking me about this? His eyes were still searching all over face and she still was unsure why. Usually such a transfixed gaze from him would leave her feeling flustered and yet now there was something accusing about it. Did he think she was lying to him? Why would she lie and nearly have herself killed? Burned alive for that matter, one the worst deaths a person could ever go through and so willingly. What was he thinking? Was he thinking about this the whole time he spent his time away from her? Did his mother actually plant that seed in his head? Question after question came swirling, so much that she was bound to get a headache if left to continue. She didn't want to believe that he would actually think so lowly of her. She even found herself saddened by the fact that he would question her like this. As soon as she was letting Rob in, one step at a time, she found that she should have kept the door closed and locked. I'm not saying I don't trust you, Cassandra. As if he read her mind, he said that and now she was beginning to believe all she was thinking was being confirmed true. I just think. It just seems. Her lord husband could barely get a sentence out, his eyes finally giving themselves a break from their intense stare-off from her face to look absently down at the blanket. I don't want to think you're like them. Like who? Squaring her jaw, Cassandra bowed her brows as she awaited his answer. Like your family. That struck her hard. What nerve did he have to say that? Why was he bashing her family right before her very face? The Lannisters and Starks, she knew, weren't great friends, but for him to say this. To insult her family. That enraged her. And what is that supposed to mean, Rob? What is so wrong with my family that you dare say that to my face? It was hard to keep her voice leveled, but she was downright offended. How dare he say that? Her family might have not been perfect, but they were hers and she'd rather bite the throat off in the likeness of some of anyone that dared to speak ill of them. Words were just as heavy and powerful as the sword, they had impact, they could damn an entire reputation. Not a trace of him looked as if he was going to take what he said back. Instead, he looked as if he stood completely behind what he told her. I think it's quite clear that it was someone in your family that pushed my little brother from the tower and then they sent that bastard to come finish the job. Stunned, her eyes widened as her lips pried apart in her state of shock. Bran's fall had been accidental, the boy loved to climb and he slipped, she was told that. Why would her family want to harm a little boy? Why in seven hells would he think that? Are you accusing my family for trying to murder a child? And if I am? Your uncle, he stayed behind, didn't he? Instead of following his king to the hunt, he stayed behind along with your mother during the time Bran had fallen. Now he was incensed as she was, his once gelid eyes now ablaze as he spoke. How could she soak all of this in? She was still unsure of why he boldly assumed her family was involved in this. Did Lady Stark assume this as well? Was her family going to be wrongly accused for the terrible fall and near murder of Brandon Stark? Cassandra did find it strange how her uncle did not accompany her father and brother to the hunt. She wanted to scold him for it. She even told Rob how much she had disliked it before he left. But her Uncle Jaime, pushing a boy out of a tower to fall to his death. No, she couldn't scarcely fathom that. No, her Uncle Jaime wouldn't do something like that. Why would he harm a little boy? What sense did that make? And her mother would never harm a child, of that Cassandra felt so sure of. Her mother was not that kind of person. Her mother may have been unkind to outsiders, but she would not kill a child. You're mad. The former princess practically yelled, wanting to sink her fist into his face. It was because she could control herself and knew that arguing and fighting wouldn't change anything. She kicked the blankets off the lower half of her body and stood to her feet. The floor was colder than she thought now that she was bare feet, but her anger quickly override that sudden chill of her soles. You can go rot, Robb Stark. I cannot believe you and your mother would think so lowly of my family, and then you look at me like I would kill myself or lay a hand of harm to little Bran. You can most certainly rot. All she wanted to do is be far away from him. Perhaps she'd sleep in Sansa or Arya's old room for the time being. Wherever she had went, she wanted to be far away from Robb Stark, that's for damn sure. Cassandra. His rough hand wrapped itself around her wrist, attempting to keep her fro stomping right out at the door like she was about it. Using all her strength to pull her wrist away from him, she struggled to get herself out of his hold, but his other hand had taken a tight lock to her other wrist. Unharmed me. Unharmed me right now. If he would not see reason, then she could not see it as well. All she wanted was to be far from him, and he was stopping her from doing just that. I said unharmed me. He didn't listen. Robb only tightened his hold on her wrist, enough to keep her from being unable to make him budge. I didn't think you were involved in all of this. I want to believe you are innocent, but I can't believe that your family is as well. Narrowing her eyes, Cassandra gave him a ferocious glare. You want to believe? You mean you want to believe me innocent, and yet you sit here and look at me as if I am guilty? And then, you assume my family guilty of such baseless things? Is that why you've been ignoring me all this time? Because you think me and my family are out to harm your little brother? It all made sense why he was keeping his distance. Why wouldn't he if he thought she was some sort of child killer? Her body was flaring with so much rage that she thought steam might come off her head. Every second she was spending looking at him, listening to him, she wanted to scream. Then what am I to believe, Cassandra? That your family is innocent? That the dagger found on that man's body did not come from someone wealthy? A dagger made with Valyrian steel with a dragon bone hilt. It couldn't have belonged to the likes of him. Do you not see how condemning such evidence is? Valyrian steel and a dragon bone hilt. Why did that seem so familiar to her? Her eyes absently looked at the corner of the room, her eyes squinting as her mind tried to conjure up when she had heard or seen such a dagger of that description. She couldn't trace where she heard, seen, or who it could possibly belong to. Shaking her head, she pushed the thought aside. That doesn't mean my family did it, it easily could have been anyone. The Stark might have made enemies of another family, and perhaps their enemy tried to frame her own. She supposed she couldn't fault him for coming to this conclusion, but that didn't mean she wasn't going to protect her family without a fight. Let me speak to your mother then. Still pulling her arms to free herself of his grasp, she found that he still refused to let her go. I can explain to her if this is what she believes. Let me see the dagger for myself, and I promise to tell her the truth. For a second, she saw his expression falter. Cassandra had thought she baited him, and instead, she was given a sigh and froze when his forehead pressed to her own. With her eyes big and staring, she studied his face as he kept his eyes closed, looking quite pained. I swore to my mother to keep this from you, and I broke my oath. I broke my oath to my own mother. He sounded so defeated, annoyed, and upset with himself. And here she was, forcing herself not to smile at the fact that he had broken oath to tell her this. Something like this was supposed to be kept from the dark from her, and yet her husband trusted her so much to actually tell her the truth against his own will. Robb, if my family has anything to do with Bran's fall. Cassandra still didn't want to believe it. She just couldn't see why any of her family would do this, but if it were true, what was she to do? Would she have to choose between her new family or her own blood? Naturally, she'd choose the family she always knew, except she found herself walking a thin line if she wanted to betray Robb or not. For him to be her enemy, it didn't make her happy, and nor was it desirable in any shape or form. She come to like Rickon and his sisters she didn't have much time with. Lord Stark had been nothing but good to her since she knew him, and she had wanted to know more of Lady Stark. Would she have to give all of that up? Cassandra should have been happy at the disturbance of this marriage, to be able to flee back to her mother's arms and at her twin's side, but she wasn't happy about that at all. Let me see the dagger. If it belonged to not one member of her family, then this could all end, wouldn't it? Their speculations only came to be because of the assassin, right? Cassandra could clear her family's name if she could identify the dagger did not belong to her family, but it was the matter if they would believe her or not that was the concern. With uncertainty in his eyes, Rob exhaled and let her go. He left their bedchamber, hopefully so that she could put an end to all of this. Cassandra closed her eyes, praying to the Seven that this had been nothing but an misunderstanding. If she could prove her family's innocence, then she would have fixed this temporary mess with Rob. Even if it meant she would have to stay married to him, she was willing in efforts to protect her mother and uncle, who were the main suspects in all of this. Rob returned to her, not alone but with Sir Roderick that kept the dagger on his person. Her husband kept his head low, almost like he was ashamed to bring the man here. "My lady, Sir Roderick began, his eyes slewing to the young lord, "I don't think you should put yourself in the middle of this. This is my family, Sir Roderick." The former princess told him sternly, "Whether it has been for a short time or no, the Starks are my family as well. Let me put an end to all of this." After a short-lived stare-off, the older man finally pulled the dagger out from his sword belt and laid it in her hands. She had been so confident, already believing how unfamiliar it was. "This dagger." Her voice trailed slowly, like her words were unwilling to finish what they were meant to say. Her eyes looked closely and her mind was sent reeling, unable to comprehend or process the images that kept flashing in her mind. "This dagger." The sadness came in waves, right after the shock. Her green eyes tried their best not to be the size of the golden shields she watched her Lannister family's army wield. This dagger had belonged to none other than her father. She remembered this because she was right there during that tourney for Joffrey's birthday and watched her father and Littlefinger bet against her uncle Jaime. This dagger was the prize and her father had won by the stroke of luck and bragged about it for days. Of course, Cassandra knew for certain that her father would never send anyone to kill a little boy, especially not Ned Stark's boy. Her father was off in the Wolfswood during the hunt while it happened, Bran's fall that is, but how could this dagger end up in another's hands? He was framed or someone was simply using it to frame her Lannister family. That was the only thing that made much sense to her at least. Swallowing thickly, she wondered if she should keep this to herself or actually tell the truth. Rob and Sir Roderick were waiting, eyes unable to tear away from her until she gave them an answer, and now she wished she didn't push the issue. "Stefan." His bones were so weary, the constant travel left him unimaginably tired. Considering that he spent months back and forth down King's Road, he shouldn't have been so eager to go see his uncle, but he was. Whatever Stannis has learned must have been crucial and something that not just anyone should know. Certainly, if it was paramount to make him bolt back to this fortified home of his, then Stefan needed to know of it. He wished he could have spent a little more time back in King's Landing though, just to see how Ned Stark was going to adjust to things. The man needed some help understanding the ways of the royal court, seeing as he might melt before autumn came. Although tired, Stefan knew his uncle would not want him drowsy. Stannis was his uncle and they had an amity despite how most people seemed to loathe his prudence. The man was rightly strict but fair, which was one of the admirable things about him. Perhaps his own sense of justice stemmed from the way his uncle was. If Stefan wanted to even be in his presence, however, he had to stand tall and be alert. His uncle would not any accept less. Even if he did poke and prod the man's patience with his sarcasm and desperate need to make the air lighter, he still had to put on airs of a proper prince. What he knew most of all was that he was going to get flack for not telling his mother that he had left King's Landing. Stefan left it up to his father to break the news to her that he would be temporarily in the Stormlands, much to her dismay. She would know better that he was not at Storm's End since Renly hardly left King's Landing for too long, so she was sure to easily pick up he went to Dragonstone. How would his mother feel upon the news? On the edge, he hoped. Surely whatever his uncle knew had to do with her. It just had to. Blackwater Bay smelled much better the farther you went from King's Landing, considering how foul his home smelled. When he was king, Stefan was more than set to do a massive clean-up to make sure his home was beautiful as well as clean. Who wants to be the king of Westeros and reside in a dirty, smelly city? Not Stefan. His father didn't care about the stench or how littered the streets were, and he doubted King Aes before him cared about it either. Old Town was much more beautiful and its air was so crisp that you could taste the sea breeze and not blanch. You would have thought it a home to a king, but sadly it wasn't. Stefan oft found himself jealous of how lovely Old Town was, and now he had to rebuild King's Landing to be much greater. It only took a few hours to reach the small island of Dragonstone. He was flanked with servants as he reached the last step of the gangplank, immediately ready to tend to him, but he dismissed them with a wave of his hand. "I am in no need of your services," he told them kindly, presenting a smile to those who were only doing their duties. The servants rather liked him, more than they liked his uncle Renly. Stefan barely gave them work while his uncle had them shucking like fools over the stupidest of tasks when he rarely made himself to come here. Rare as his presence may be here, he always gave a ruckus. He was led inside and made to follow one of his uncle's trusted guards. If he could remember correctly, the man was named Holden. The only reason why Stefan remembered his name was because the guard had always been cute-eye soft to his sister. When Cassandra came with him to Dragonstone when they were young, Holden endured her overbearing young mind filled with questions and dealt with her with patience. In fact, Stefan knew the man liked that someone looked to him as if he knew everything. It was strange that out of all places they could speak, he was being led to Egon's garden. His uncle was not a man that held value of nature, and yet the place had been kept in tip-top shape as if he cared for every berry and sprout that had grown. Whether it was for sweet Shireen or appearances, the boy hardly knew. And to see his uncle, with his stance filled with authority, looking out at the distance with his back turned had looked so strange to him. This was not the kind of setting Stefan thought this would all come down to. He thought it would be much more darker, or perhaps, his own childish giddiness about being in the chamber of the painted table was making his judgment so sharty. "Nice weather we're having." His eyes roamed around the garden as his uncle slowly turned to face him, his face stern as always. "What? You wanted to talk outside in a garden? I thought the weather might be the perfect greeting." Not a smile or a laugh. He expected that much. "I didn't think you'd arrive so soon, nephew. I thought for sure the day's travel would have left you too weak." "I'm a boy of 7 and 10, uncle. I have more energy than you and my father, you know." Crossing his arms, he leaned against a nearby oak tree since it was the closest thing for support. There was no bench nearby for him to sit on, so he figured this will do. "And the reason why we're in the garden?" Before he could receive the answer, he heard what sounded like boots running against the stone-made walkway. Not a second given for his head to turn, a small body wrapped around his leg. "Stefan, you're here." Shireen. His little cousin. She had grown much taller than he saw her last. Eagerly, he lifted the girl in his arms and brought her in for a proper hug, feeling those skinny arms of hers wrap themselves around his neck. "Who told you to grow while I was away? You're supposed to stay a little girl." She laughed in his ear, pulling back just a little so he could see her face. No matter the feel of grayscale or the sight of it, Stefan still thought her beautiful. Even if she did not hold the description of what it meant to be a beauty in Westeros, it was her smile that could outmatch any of the roses in the gardens of the world. It was her smile that had drawn Stefan in and never seemed to let him go. Who knows what the future held for her anyway? She could be striking, even with that black and grey patch on her cheek and neck. A person could one day overlook the battle scar of a disease that usually took so many. Shireen was strong as an infant than most were as men, who would not find the allure in that. "I can't stop myself from growing, Stefan. Besides, you get taller every time I see you. You're a giant now. I think I'm taller than your father now." Both of them looked to Stannis, who rose a brow at such an observation. He did not smile, at least it wasn't on his lips. As much as his uncle despised showing much emotion, you could see it flash across his eyes every once in a blue moon. "Think I can beat your scary dad now that I am so tall?" "No." Shireen shook her head, confident in her answer. "Nobody can beat my father." Natural, he knew, for a girl to be on the side of her father. Stefan pretended to be wounded by her words, closing his eyes and sniffling. "I guess I'll just have to grow even taller." "Do that and you won't fit through any doors." After a few more minutes of playful banter, he let her down on her feet like she had been the most fragile thing in the world. She looked as if she had more to say, but with one look from her father, she knew better than to proceed. Will you be staying for supper, Stefan? If your father isn't so eager to kick me out, I'll stay for the month. I'm in no rush to go back home, especially now that I've seen you. Her lips curled into a smile as she lowered her head, pushing back some of her hair before meeting his eyes again. I'll be in my room then. Mother wasn't too happy about letting me out, but father knew you'd want to see me. Her mother, huh? The woman was an odd one, and Stefan usually kept his distance. He gave the woman pleasant greetings, smiles and all the courtesy a boy should bear for the wife of his blood, but he was always so quick to find distance and keep it. He wasn't sure what was really wrong with his aunt, and he wasn't all too eager to find out. I'll always want to see you, Shireen. You can count on that. The little lady beamed at his words before bowing politely to her father and spinning on her little heels. The girl went running, her hair bouncing as she did, and he felt that little light she brought to him suddenly go away with her. How could such a sweet girl be born out of Stannis and Sliss? Stefan had no idea. Turning to his uncle, he gave a bow of his head. No more distractions, I'm ready to listen. Pleased, Stannis brought his hands behind him with one hand holding the other's wrist. Before Lord Orin's untimely death he began, bringing a shiver down Stefan's spine almost immediately. Part of him at least hoped his mother nor his uncle had killed that man right under his nose. A trail of bodies was bound to be at their footsteps by autumn, and how enraged would he be to know a man he saw as a grandfather was brought to an end over a petty secret. He and I went to a few places in Flea Bottom. Startled, he wasn't prepared for a servant to come shuffling towards him with a small piece of parchment in their hands. The blonde-haired prince took it without question, looking down with what looked to be like written locations. He and I went to these places exactly. Just what was important to have Lord Orin and his uncle Stannis so curious to see these places for themselves? His blue eyes looked to his uncle with question, but he was afraid that his uncle would not give him too many answers. This might have to be something he would have to personally investigate. You won't be surprised of all of what you'll find. Quirking a brow, Stefan pondered his words. Why wouldn't he be surprised? It is what it all adds up to, that will, my nephew. For a second, he thought that his stony uncle was being apologetic. No, not apologetic, empathetic. That he felt a shred of sorry about what was to happen at the end of all this. Stefan slowly made his eyes look back at the paper, his hands nearly trembling in apprehensiveness. In all efforts to gather himself, to stop the spinning of thoughts and the shakiness of his hand, he decided to fix his mind elsewhere. There was another idea that he wanted to approach his uncle about, and he wanted to see if it was a well-thought plan. Who better than his uncle? The man might have been just master of ships, but he could trust his judgment on this matter. There's something else I want you to help me with, and it must be done quietly. Stannis looked at him from the corner of his eyes, a brow slowly raising in obvious curiosity. I want some of your best sailors and a man you trust to speak with foreign cities. And why is that, nephew? This is a tall order. He knew it so, but if there was anyone could trust with this, it was his uncle. And once the man knew the reason, Stefan was sure it would be wholeheartedly supported. I am aware of the massive amount of debt my father owes to the Lannisters, my grandfather especially. Slipping the paper into the pocket of his breeches, the Crown Prince folded his arms as he tilted his head back to look at the rather cloudy sky. And I want that to end. And you're proposing that we build a relationship with MYR for gold. It disappointed him, just a bit, because he wanted to reveal that information himself. His uncle was just too cunning for him to get the full satisfaction of revealing this plan, and he had to settle for telling Stannis that he was right. Correct. He said plainly, trying to hide his childish disappointment. Who else better to benefit from? From his peripherals, he thought he caught a smile on his uncle's face. It was because he blinked that he wasn't sure if he was imagining that or not. And what will you give them in return? Our hand. I've heard whispers that a war was brewing over there between Lys and Tioche, but these are just rumors. Who is to say they won't turn on MYR or even want MYR's help in order to fight the other? I could give MYR men if they needed them, and that's more than they could want from us. Whoever they support could become useful as well, don't you think? A silence came, and Stefan suddenly became nervous, unsure of what this quiet meant. Swallowing the lump in his throat, his arms uncrossed and lifelessly fell to his side. What if this was just a stupid idea? Was his uncle about to give him a lengthy explanation of how he was thinking too simply or not enough? Before he could say he wanted to take it back, Stannis replied. You're thinking like a king, nephew. Those words moved him, making his pride increase tenfold for what he wanted to save his kingdom. If he were to be king one day and for some reason, he surely thought his grandfather to outlive his father, he did not want to be a slave to Tywin's thumb. Steffon loved his grandfather, but he would not be anyone's puppet. Whoever ruled the treasury both in debt and duty had ruled the kingdom. The treasury needed to belong to a king again. It needed to be his. He must worry about the coins and stack them than to let a room that should be spilling with gold upon gold remain so empty. I'll see what I can do. Until then, take a rest. You've had a long travel from Winterfell to here, you deserve that much. Cassandra. Her eyes swung back and forth like a pendulum, watching how Catelyn Stark was staring at her son so intensely. You would have thought the boy would have froze into a block of ice just from her stare alone. Now she was forced to stand in the Godswood with Theon, Maester Luwin, Sir Roderick, and Robb. Since they were the ones who made the oath right here in this very place, they were the ones to deal with why the oath had been broken. It was never her intention to get Robb into trouble. Now she had to stand there and watch him be silently berated from breaking his mother's trust. He chose her, the wife he barely knew, over his own mother, and while Cassandra knew how much of a big deal it was, she was only glad that it led her to the truth. That she had now found some way from letting this all escalate further. Who knows what could have came out of this? A war? No, her father still lived and would never war against the Starks. You said you wouldn't answer until you were before me. Lady Stark finally turned her attention to her, hands laced and back straight in all her Riverlands poise. Now tell me who the dagger belongs to. She usually spoke so warmly. Right now, however, Cassandra hardly knew who this woman was that stood before her. A distressed mother, a woman had been through a terrible month and week. A woman who had just about lost all her patience. It belongs to my father. Seeing as the king had no connections to Bran's fall as well as his attempted murder, Cassandra thought it simple to at least speak that truth. My father was made a sword when he first became king, and the dagger was accompanied with it naturally. He usually keeps it in the armory since it is so valuable, but it was obviously stolen. My father doesn't carry daggers, he calls them a thief's hand. My father fights with a hammer, never a sword. Her green eyes watched them digest her words. The Maester fiddled with his chain, eyes low as he seemed to be in thought before flicking his gaze back to Lady Stark. She seemed to be considering it for the most part, and you have no idea who could have stolen it. Cassandra shook her head. No, she herself was still pondering who could have. I did not know it was stolen in the first place. It has never left the armory save for a time my father used it to bet against my uncle Jaime during a tourney, who was up against the Knight of Flowers and was unhorsed. He had bet with Lord Baelish and won. He bragged about it for days since my father is simply terrible at winning bets. Could your uncle have stolen it? Sir Roderick questioned. She assumed that this would be asked. Never. Finding her confidence, she straightened herself and kept her expression free of any questionable twitch or aversion of gaze. When would he have the time? My uncle is much more diligent in King's Landing than he ever was here. I suppose he thought he had some freedom in the north, since who would dare bring the king harm in such a place? I was unhappy about him staying here, I even spoke of it to my husband as I saw him off to the hunt. Her eyes flew to Theon, knowing that Robb's confirmation wouldn't be enough. The Greyjoy halfway frowned, sighing as he crossed his arms. She did. I remember. Should she defend her mother? Would they bother to ask how Cersei Lannister found her way to the armory and nobody questioned it? Cassandra didn't think they would, and she was relieved to hear her mother had not been mentioned. And the imp? Lady Stark muttered, making the young girl frown. Imp. How could she call her uncle that in front of her? Small as he may be, it was not by choice, and even if it was, he was still a person. Imp was an insult. Dwarfen I believed it is called, good mother. It took everything in her not correct her so vehemently, but the flare was there in her eyes. My uncle Tyrion could buy 1,000 daggers of his own, why take my father's? The two actually get along reasonably, at most times, and stealing for him is like a death sentence. I do doubt with all my being that my uncle would even begin to think of maiming a boy, seeing as he was with your lord husband as well as my father during the hunt. It might come as a surprise to you all, but he is quite soft at heart to children despite his reputation. Considering how colorful her uncle's daily life was, she could see how hard it was to come to his defense. It seemed like most of the men in her family liked to whore on an everyday basis save for a good few. My uncle is also intelligent, renownedly so. He wouldn't be so stupid. Whoever did this was cruel and stupid. Who could it be now? Joffrey was at the hunt as well along with her father. Joffrey might have had such a scary streak, but throwing Bran off a tower seemed like the unnecessary extreme for him. Unless, however, the boy did something to get him so irate. Maybe that wasn't too hard to believe actually. Stefan being involved didn't cross her mind not once. Tommen and Myrcella. There was no way those two were even capable of such things. Her family was in the clear as she thought it to be. As she knew them to be. There was no reason for anyone to suggest they would harm Bran and send a man to kill him. And how am I to know you're telling the truth? Cassandra hadn't thought of that. She had no proof whatsoever. What evidence could she give? She only had words and one witness over such a small, insignificant portion. You don't know, my good mother. It was a simple answer and the only one she had. You could either take my word or not take it. I am no liar, I have a clean name. I care for this family because it is mine now. My blood, however, is still very important to me. If I had reason to believe they had done something so horrifying, I would condemn it, openly. The nod was subtle as the woman slowly smiled. I see. Was all she said, not giving her any indication if she believed this or not. Even though it was the truth, Cassandra couldn't help but to feel that maybe the woman didn't believe her. If that was the case, then what would happen? All she could was watch the Tully Stark leave her, letting her stand in the Godswood with Theon, Sir Roderick, and the Maester trailing behind shortly after her. Robb had stayed, giving her some solace that she had not been abandoned or deemed an enemy. You could have lied. His words surprised her, leaving her brows raised at what he actually suggested. But you didn't. Out of them all, Robb believed her. She knew that for a fact. He stood there, smiling and his eyes giving her no signs that he thought her a liar in efforts to save her family's own skin. Her heart felt like it was swelling with happiness, or was it relief? She was unsure. What made her happy and relieved now wasn't that she tried her damnedest to protect her family, but that there was someone on her side, Robb most of all. Will you regret this? She found herself asking him, a little afraid to hear his answer. Briefly, he turned his head away and looked out into the woods of this serene place of worship. His lips formed a smile, his head shaking every so slightly. No. He sounded honest, like he truly believed that. Extending her arm, she took hold of Robb's leather, gloved hand. She could feel the warmth seeping through the material, easing the chill that prickled all over hers. Robb was like that, like a warm blanket to shield you from the cold. All he had ever done these past few days was protect her, even at the cost to anger her. Now she owed him that same kindness. Whether it be from himself, his own mother, or her very own, who planned to see him as some sort of piece for her daughter to manipulate should she have need of it. This minuscule piece of affection, small compared to all he had done for her, would cement that promise. He might have not known it, he might have thought this was her just being grateful. Robb Stark had done something she didn't want, and that was leave a mark on her that couldn't be easily washed away. Whatever this feeling was that was hazing over her heart and mind, it was something she will safeguard until her days were exhausted. Cersei. What do you mean Stefan has gone to Dragonstone? Why did Stefan not personally inform her? Why did it take her drunkard husband to tell her this? Her eyes nearly turned to slits, her ire rising like the fanning of flames. How could he just run off and not tell her? Anything could have happened to him and she would have not been made aware. He was the crown prince, but her son most of all. He had to be protected at all costs. As I damn well said it, woman. He went to Dragonstone and told me to tell you he did. Robert hated repeated himself, especially to her. The fool didn't realize her hearing be so perfect, she was mainly questioning herself than she was acting unsure of what he meant. Don't know why he wants to see Stannis so much anyway. Even Robert questioned that, which had seemed so unlike him. Their eldest boy could do no wrong in his eyes, and yet his sudden rush to see that boar and prudish Baratheon made the both of them curious. Wringing her hands, Cersei tried to think of what would be so important for the boy to see his uncle. Did Stannis request it? Possibly. The two of them got along rather well considering their personalities were so vastly different. Stefan was a lively boy, a personality that was unlike hers because he enjoyed being social. Cersei lost that feeling long ago when her only good friend had to die when she was younger. Have you? The Queen's ears perked upon her husband's voice. She had half a mind to ignore him, but something willed her to listen. Have you heard anything from Cassie? He missed her. Cersei presumed he would. She was their first girl, given to them at the same time as their first boy. They had known her for 17 years and now she was suddenly gone, ripped from them. It was all his doing, so she hoped the pain was far more worse. It could have been worse than how she felt though. A piece of her felt like it was missing, like her heart wasn't all the way full. No, I haven't, my love. She told him quietly. Send her a raven as I will when you are ready. Robert was not a fan of letters, she knew. He'd rather get it all out in the open, but that could not be done. Their daughter was miles away in a frigid wasteland filled with barbarians. He did that. He did that because of his obsession with the Starks, and now he had the audacity to feel pained by it. I didn't think I'd miss that girl this much. She is our daughter. Cersei kept her eyes lowered, halfway closed. Of course you would. Unable to keep herself from even daring to stand in his presence any longer, she decided to leave the Solar. It was quite startling to know her daughter wouldn't have her own place in the north. They shared a room instead of having their own, meaning Cassandra woke up and went to sleep with Robb Stark beside her. A child was bound to be born at this rate, and Cersei knew her daughter was ripe and fertile, but she didn't want to think of her little girl having a little one of their own just yet. Her own vanity didn't want to think she'd be a grandmother anytime soon either. She was too young to be one, she reasoned. Her hand still grasping the straws of her beauty, even at the cost of her own family. The warm hallways of the Red Keep were dimly lit, only letting such a shallow half of the sunlight touch her and the smooth floors. Her heels clicked and soon drowned into nothing in her ears since memories of years ago began to resurface. Almost like past scenes became real, her eyes thought they had seen a little Stefan and Joffrey ripping and running the halls. Their faces held glee, the one where their eyes were squint clothes and their grins were from ear to ear. A smile began to bloom on her own face and became to completion when Joffrey fell on his wobbly, red knees. Pained only just a little, he grimaced, and tried his best to hurry himself right on his feet. Stefan had came before he got himself upright, his little hand held out for his little brother to take. He helped him up, held his hand, and ran with him to make sure he wasn't left behind again. Just seeing such a memory again had made her eyes become glassy with tears she didn't think she should shed. Those times were simpler, kinder. All her children were nearby and her boys got along with no wrinkles or rifts. Now they fought, they glared, and they argued. Neither one made the first step to mend their relationship, neither one apologized. Neither one tried to salve the wounds they made to one another verbally, and now it became physical. It was up to her, Queen and their mother most of all, to rectify things. She had to pull her older boys back together, especially since the fate of the kingdom rested in their hands. Stefan would be king and Joffrey would be warden of the West in their grandfather's place in the future should all be right. They needed each other, and most of all, she needed them. I hear the Crown Prince has left and gone to Dragonstone. Gossiping servants came fluttering in her ear. Cersei would have paid them no mind had it not been her boy they were yapping about amongst each other. Why is he so eager to see Lord Stannis? Who knows, said the other servant, why should anyone care? Probably royal business. But he only just returned. Why be so quick to see his lord uncle? Surely, he should get himself properly rested before traveling again. It might have something to do with what happened on the road, don't you think? Now things were much more interesting. Keeping herself still, she made sure that nobody had noticed her in the hall. It was still quite empty, letting her hear word for word without her leaning closer to the sources because of any sudden noises. What happened on the road? They say Prince Stefan slapped his brother at the Trident. What a terrible rumor to spread. Surely, it would be so unfavorable to Stefan. They also say that the reason why is because Prince Joffrey struck the little Stark girl. He threatened her to end her with his blade, and Prince Stefan saw with his own eyes and was so furious. A gasp and then some silence before it was quickly refilled with conversation. Why would Prince Joffrey do that? I just hope the girl will substitute Prince Tommen. The little prince gets enough of his brother's ridicule. It struck her nerves to hear them talk about Joffrey this way. Her boy was just a little mean, but he meant well. He played with Tommen so roughly because they were boys, and that was just simply how boys were. Tommen was just young, soft and sweet, but he had to grow some thicker skin, and Joffrey was preparing him for that. That was all. I don't know. The servant sounded quite confused, unsure of herself. Probably because she didn't know what she was talking about, Cersei reasoned. Whether or not to make them quiet or punish them for their insolence was up in the air. I have a feeling the castle most certainly will be less than boring. Has it ever been? Finding something humorous in that, Cersei suppressed a snort and decided to move along. She was no longer entertained by their gossip and thought a proper visit to Maester Pycelle was in order. The old man was right under her thumb. Surely, he would give her a lengthy discussion of Ned Stark's first council meeting at hand. During the way, however, she would have those chattering servants would receive 10 lashes each. Nobody would badmouth her boy and not face her wrath. Cassandra. I don't want you to tell Stefan about any of this. Her words were stern, not a hint of a smile on her face as her eyes stared at her friend who was organizing her wardrobe. Jocelyn didn't pause or change her pace, she kept folding the dresses into the neatest of squares that were hand-washed and dried by servants. The last thing I need is for him to worry. I understand. There was a but coming, Cassandra could feel it. Her eyes closed and a sigh escaped her right before it was said, but he'll figure it out. With Lady Stark going to King's Landing, he's bound to find out some way or another. And you know how he'll react, hearing that you nearly met your end in a fire. And not only that, for your family to be to blamed for the near murder of Lord Brandon. Sking, she shook her head. He'll explode, most certainly. He most certainly would, and she wanted to avoid that at all costs. Stefan trusted her to be safe here. How would he feel if he knew she was unable to rightfully protect herself that day? He would be angry, but most of all disappointed. How could she, skilled by the sword under his tutelage, nearly let that man get away with killing her? She still felt guilty about it, the anger kept gnawing at the pits of her stomach and she desperately tried to ignore it. For a good hour she would forget, and then it came back with a vengeance all over again. Please. Hopeless, Cassandra couldn't find it in herself to really want to beg. It was her pride that was still freshly wounded on so many wavelengths, and this would just make a deeper gash if Stefan were to know. The blonde-haired girl sighed, stopping mid-fold. All right, I won't tell him. Relieved by that, Cassandra flopped down in a chair with her hands barely laying on its arms. He's going to find out and be more pissed that neither of us told him. If he comes running his way here, I'm pointing my fingers at you. By the breath of the mother and the father, she'd rather have been burnt alive than having Stefan come back here in such a rage. At least she would have been soundly dead and not be there to bear witness to it. Her brother was, for the most part, the cold kind of angry, not the hot kind like she was. He had their mother's temper, who at times could be like tumultuous waves and other times, cold and calculating. She'd rather be like their father, seething, red-faced, shouting and name-calling all while ready for violence. As of lately, however, she learned she couldn't always hit at the objects and people that riled her. With Lady Stark away, you are the Lady of Winterfell. Strange as it was true. With all that was going on, her good mother wasn't in the right mindset to actually teach her how to govern this place as its lady, and now what was she to do? How could she fulfill her duties if she didn't know what they were? There were people she would most certainly have to meet and things that had to be done around here. Perhaps asking Lord Lewin for advice would be the wisest thing to do. Does it matter? I can hardly be a good one, for I have had none of the lessons. Cassandra replied with disinterest, mainly because she wasn't sure how this was supposed to work. Lady Stark didn't think she would have to give me such a position so soon, and her mind is too warped in her grief to care. Jocelyn gave her a pitiful look, her eyes sad and empathetic. Cassandra didn't want that, she didn't want to be pitied, but she couldn't just tell the girl to stop it. It was because Jocelyn cared that she had done it, so what would be the point in being angry? Sighing, she tilted her head back, closing her eyes some as she tried to cool her nerves by thinking less harshly. Perhaps she should just start thinking less most of all. Robb was away with his duties, Rickon was in his lessons, and Bran was still asleep. There was no one to bother outside her ladies-in-waiting and handmaidens or even her closest friend. Ever since the fire, she didn't dare go near the library tower because she still had flashes of her near death, so much that she could barely breathe thinking about the tower. All her mind and body could remember was the smoke filling her lungs, the rawness of her throat, and the constant coughing that pained her lungs. It was hard to look at fire now and not think about it, but she knew could get over these fears. They were fresh, temporary. Cassandra, are you really not worried about Lady Stark going to King's Landing? Sinking further into the chair, she raised her leg to hang over the chair, deciding to be completely lazy in her comfort. Her posture was entirely unladylike, but who was she meant to impress now? Certainly not Jocelyn. Why should I? I have defended my family as best I can. Her eyes observed Jocelyn's features, seeing cleared out. What more can I do? I encourage her to tell her husband what happened to Bran. He deserves to know, Brandon is his son after all. True, but... Before she could finish, the door slowly opened. Throwing her leg down and sitting upright again like a proper lady, Jocelyn immediately smoothed out her dress, her head bowing immediately. Lord Stark. Robb walked in with tired steps. His eyes were drooping, almost like they had every day since he took up being Lord of Winterfell in entirety. I was just leaving. Smirking at Cassandra quickly, Jocelyn gave the proper courtesy and shuffled out of the room, closing the door behind her. Are you going to listen to me for once and take a break? Cassandra asked him, raising her eyes to properly look at him as he removed his fur cloak. Do I look that bad? He had to nerve to ask her that. The good in her wanted to lie, but Cassandra didn't want to be dishonest over something so minuscule. Yes. She told him sharply, you look like you've been kicked around. Crinkling her eyes, she withheld a snort as he gave her a sloth-like glower. He didn't even have it in him to give her a look something menacing because he was too tired. The poor lad, she thought. I shall tell someone to draw you a proper bath, Seven knows you need one. Not only am I being told I look terrible, you say I smell awful as well. Unable to fathom how the insults kept being hurled at him, Robb quickly rose an arm to sniff his armpit. Cassandra caught his sour expression immediately afterwards. I suppose. Embarrassed now, his eyes shyly didn't meet her own, that I do need a bath. Withholding her laugh, trying not to let even the smallest of sounds of it loose, she shifted her attention to the sudden knock on their door. Leaving Robb to contemplate her words of truth, she opened the door to see a messenger. My lady, he bowed his head upon the sight of her, you've received a raven from your uncle, Lord Tyrion. Curious, she allowed the man to place the letter in her hand. Thank you, and as you go, could you tell one of the servants to draw my lord husband a bath? With an eager nod, she graced the young man with a smile before letting him go and closing the door. Unfolding the letter, her eyes stayed glued to her uncle's neat and familiar handwriting. He says before he heads home, he will come to visit me once he leaves the wall. She informed her husband, who was gazing straight at her face with a question nearly ready to leave his lips. Are you content with that? After believing her family had something to do with the near assassination of Bran, would Robb feel uneasy of having her uncle visit them? A look of thought came across his face before he shook his head. He is your family, he is welcome to see you as he likes. Robb didn't sound enthusiastic, which she should have expected. He seemed neutral on the matter, but who was to say if he wasn't placating her? His mother thought sourly of her uncle, and she was sure Robb might share the same feelings. What did her uncle do to make Lady Stark dislike him so? Was it because he was a dwarf? Possibly. Could it be his reputation? Most likely. Most people, ladies especially, did not like the trail of rumors and truths that followed his footsteps. Never mind her husband's feelings on her uncle, Cassandra was happy to see him. She wanted to hear everything about the war, hear the stories of the people and some of the history he uncovered while he was there. Her uncle always had a fascinating way of storytelling, drawing you in and leaving you eager for more. Not only that, he always added a joke here and there that kept you laughing while on the edge of your seat. The servants came tub carried and buckets of steaming hot water she assumed to be from the springs she heard about. Her eyes watched them curiously as they filled the tub, adding scents that would rid her husband of the sweat and smell of outside that was deep into his skin. When they left, she had no idea he would begin to strip himself of his clothes right away. Uncomfortably, she quickly turned her back on him, acting as if she never seen him naked before. It was only once, a memory that burned itself in her mind. She could hear the splashing of water and the relaxed sigh once he settled himself in. After what seemed like the appropriate amount of time, she cautiously turned her head to look at him. He was fully seated in the tub and his lower half was out of her sight due to the rippling of the waters, concealing the rest of him from her gaze with the help of distortion of light and space within their room. The smile of his face was content, like he had needed this bath all day. Where was her thanks? She stubbornly wondered. If it weren't for her, he would have been tired and dirty. Better? She asked him, innocent in her stubbornness. Better. The need to frown was so strong in all its childish glory. If you want, you could join me. What? He said it so flippantly, like it was a pure suggestion and the intention of it all was not as sexual as it implied. With her eyes wide and shock on her face, she was bewildered of how her husband could so casually suggest something like that. Rob's eyes crinkled, smile on his face. I was only joking. Relieved, she shook her head. You know, I think you get a real kick out of annoying me, Rob Stark. Haughtily, Cassandra raised her chin. And what if I were to have agreed? How would you feel then? Surprised by her answer, his brows rose. I didn't think you would. Is that a challenge? I wasn't challenging you. Yes, now he was the one properly flustered. Smirking, she couldn't help but chuckle. See how it feels when it done to you. He looked like a little boy, ready to pout, before stubborn turning his face to look away from her. Whether it was to save face or because he was still shocked by her suggestion was unknown to her as he sunk himself lower into the water. The bath did look nice. She could tell the waters were hot from the way his pale skin reddened in some areas and the constant steam that rose from the surface. She always bathed in the wee hours of the morning, right after he left for privacy, and then right after dinner before he returned for the night. Not once did Rob see her bare as the day she was born after their consummation. I'm sorry you weren't able to handle my joke. An apology or a means to rile her? Cassandra couldn't see the clear and cut difference. With a snort, she shook her head. I can handle your jibes and jokes. She told him matter-of-factly, but you are another matter entirely. The last bit came out softer, her voice losing its volume as if she didn't want him to hear it. And there is no desire within me to lose to you. Stefan. The month had gone much faster than he would have thought it would. It almost felt like only a good week had gone by, but it most certainly more. Stefan missed his home for the first time and days, so much so that he was a little joyous to be sailing Blackwater Bay back to the Red Keep. His sudden happiness made him rejuvenated, perfectly ready for any obstacle that dared show itself before him now. After Stannis helped him make quiet moves, stretching his name and hand all the way to MYR, Stefan was sure that everything would fall into place when he expected them to. When he left the harbors and was escorted by guards to his home, he didn't expect for the air in his home to seem much more chaotic than it was when he left. There was something off to him, but he couldn't properly place what had been changed or afoot. He was made aware of the many letters piled on his desk from many lords that wrote him. Why did they want to speak to him suddenly? Stefan didn't have the slightest idea to why, and he wasn't sure he was going to like what they had to say. His brief encounter with Ned Stark had been only of hellos. The man looked like he aged within the span of time Stefan spent away. He looked tired, unsure, probably because everything he knew and all his morals were made to be questioned on the daily basis. Why did this man still think his northern honor and values could touch light and heal the sinners of the south? He was still foolish in that regard, but did Stefan's respect for him grow some since he was so adamant about it? By the time Stefan reached his bedchamber, he was shocked at the amount of letters that piled on his desk. It would have been impossible for them to go unnoticed, and it made him wonder if his mother or one of her spies tried to rummage through them. Gods knows she had to wonder why these lords took a sudden interest in him, and because she was his mother. Mothers didn't exactly know privacy and letting their children live their own lives without them knowing everything that went on in them. As soon as he picked up the first letter, the seal of House Tyrell, a knock was at his door. Annoyed by the interruption, the Crown Prince briefly closed his eyes to temper his ire. "Enter," he told them, loud enough for them to hear him. The door opened, revealing a servant. "My prince, your father requests an audience with you right away." He didn't expect any less, so he obliged by telling the servant to inform his father he'd see him right away. They went scurrying off, properly closing the door behind him as Stefan looked back at the sealed envelope. It didn't look broken, meaning that nobody had rummaged through it. Surprised as he was more than grateful. Perhaps it was Sabaristan that made sure his letters quietly made their way to his desk without any of his family members knowing. Joffrey wouldn't have taken interest in any of this. The only time he came to Stefan's room was to bother him or take something he liked, but that was back when the both of them still played and fought over Cassandra's miniature carved toys. Laying the letter back down onto the pile, he left his chambers to make his way to his father's. It was the place his father liked to hold his meetings, which Stefan always loathed. As many times as his father brought women into the bedroom, the air always smelled of wine and sex, which always left Stefan so uncomfortable. Much to his surprise, Jaime stood on guard in front of his father's chambers. He looked bored and annoyed most of all, which entertained Stefan just a little. Once his footsteps were loud enough for his uncle to hear, Jaime turned to face him and hitched a brow. "You've returned, finally. I almost thought you were trying to make a home on that dreadful Dragonstone. Missed me?" Unsure of what to say without sounding condescending, he tilted his head curiously at his forced playful persona. "Nothing was the same while I was away, was it?" "Hardly," Jaime answered him, nearly sighing as he did. "Your mother wasn't too fond of your little runaway. Why did you not inform her of your trip yourself?" Good, he thought. That was exactly what he wanted. He wanted his mother annoyed and suspicious of why he left so suddenly. Whenever his mother was angry, she became easier to read and figure out. The woman held such good cunning half of the time, but lost it all when she was angry. Sometimes you had to provoke the lion to find its weakness, as dangerous as it was, but if you enter the lion's den then you have no regard for your own safety. You might as well do as much as you can while you were still alive. Mother doesn't like Uncle Stannis raking his fingers through his golden hair. Stefan shrugged his shoulders lazily. Why bother to annoy her by the mere mention of name? Because she is your mother and you are her son. He was told plainly, she wishes to know where you go, especially if she doesn't like who you went to see. As if he of all people had the right to lecture him. Sometimes Stefan couldn't just believe how clear his mother and uncle's relationship really was and how he just took this for sibling love. This overprotectiveness was to the extreme. Not even Stefan himself behaved this way to Cassandra or bothered to defend her over the littlest of things like this. His uncle nearly thought his Cersei was the mother in the faith of the Seven from how hard he fought for her. "I did not come here to be lectured, uncle," Stefan said briskly, unable to hide his apparent aggravation. "I came to see my father and now I am here. Now, will you please inform him of that?" Jaime looked as if he wanted to scold him for his attitude, but his stare said it all. Stefan did not back down or look away, he challenged him as he waited. Jaime knocked first before halfway stepping into the room to alert Robert that Stefan returned and came to see him. When the door was pushed open wider to allow him, Stefan walked past Jaime without another word or glance. He stood a few feet, looking at the corner of his eyes for the door to close. When it did, he rose his head to look at his parent. "Father." Bowing his head in the manners of a prince and son, he watched his father give a nod of acknowledgement before maneuvering his hand to direct Stefan to take a seat before him. With a few more steps, Stefan sat down in the seat and leaned back, his limbs lazily resting on the arms of the chair. "Back from Drangston." Robert rose a brow, holding out his gold chalice for Lancel to stumble his way towards desk in order to pour him a measure of wine. Stefan briefly looked to his cousin, nearly wanting to curl his lips in disdain. Lancel gave him a stiff nod, which he returned just as casually. "Something tells me that you be up to something, boy. And I want to know what it is." Now his father had reason to question just what he was doing. Did he really make all his actions so loud? No, Stefan didn't think so. It seemed normal for his father to question why he went on running to Dragonstone. He had every reason to question why he went anywhere. "All I have done was go visit Stannis, father." Presenting the most honest expression he could conjure, his father's eyes went squint with skepticism. "Surely, you are overthinking it." "Overthinking it?" His father repeated incredulously. "I'm supposed to believe you suddenly missed that boyish uncle of yours." "Ha!" His laugh was loud, filled with sarcasm as he took a large gulp of Dornish wine. "You can't fool me, Stefan. I knew you since you were a wailing babe at your mother's teat. I know when you're up to something." That irked him. Stefan couldn't help but clench his jaw concerning that. As much as he loved his father, the man wasn't properly there for his mother when he was a babe. Sure, a few times he came and lifted him in the air and bragged about having a son. Other than that, it was his mother who did everything, as much as Stefan hated to admit it. His father did not raise him in his early years, he only sought to make Stefan a proper prince when he was at least 7. "I'm not trying to fool you, father." Sitting upright, the blonde-haired boy locked his fingers to make a bridge for his chin to rest on, allowing his elbows to sink into his knees. "I swear to you that I am not up to anything." "Then tell me why you went." Persistent on the matter, wasn't he? It only served to grate on Stefan's nerves. His father usually did not question him or press for matters too much, a lot of it due because of the obvious favoritism. Stefan used to use it into his advantage for having his way, but his father seemed too suspicious to allow that to work presently. Now allowing himself to sigh, he quickly thought of a proper way to rid his king father of this obvious wariness. "Did you not find it strange why Uncle suddenly left King's Landing? Just right after Lord Arryn died?" Robert straightened up in his seat, brows slowly coming together as he seemed to take his words into consideration. "He is the master of ships, why would he suddenly leave like that?" Unless he emphasized, unless he thought something was awry. It might have served him some purpose to allow his father to be so cautious. For once, maybe his father could open his wide and see all the lying, scheming, and treachery all around him. As much as Stefan wished his father could gain some perspective, Stefan knew that was entirely unlikely. His father was blind because he chose to be. It was a matter of choice, and maybe just a little bit of knived. When will he see that games and murder happened so casually around here? "You think Stannis knows something about it?" "That was I originally thought, yes. Some truth, some lie. It was easier this way." But he knew nothing. He brought his acting skills to forefront by sighing in what seemed to be disappointment. He shook his head, slowly with doubt. "I had him tell me of the events that happened leading up to Lord Arryn's death, but he only told me little without any leads." Robert himself seemed a bit disappointed about it. He gave an understanding nod, fingers tapping against the surface of the desk. "I see." He settled, relieving Stefan that his plan worked. His father was easy to fool, which was sad since the man was the king. "How is Lord Stark doing as hand?" Shifting the conversation for a means to not let his father think too much on his trip, and because of his own curious, he saw his father's eyes lit up with interest. The man usually didn't care about politics, seeing as how he barely ran his own lands, but surely he had an opinion of his best friend was handling things around here. "Also, how is the hand tourney coming along? I was sure I might miss it." "Stiff as he always been." Robert scoffed, a small smile on his face. "He hasn't changed a bit." For some reason, Stefan didn't honestly believe that. There had to be some difference between Ned Stark now than years ago. "I see little to no improvements, but I hear he has some things planned and has been moving around." Basically, Ned Stark was either allowed to do little or something had completely soaked his interest. He suspected the latter, but what could it be? Stefan intended to find out. It just better be coming along. Ned almost proposed he shouldn't have won. Unnecessarily, Rob slammed his hand on the table. That's not how things go around here. Most certainly not. Stefan complied eagerly, nodding as he did. How are you feeling? He finally asked, concerned for his father's well-being. You seem better after Lord Arin's passing. Stefan spoke to their father right after he spoke to Lord Arin for the last time while the man was known to be on his deathbed. Back then, his father was a drunken mess who was only concerned about speaking about the past, Lyanna, the rebellion, and his days are award with Ned Stark. He constantly spoke of how Lord Arin was like a father to him. It seemed as if the wound of the loss was healing, slowly but surely. I'm fine, boy. Robert insisted, trying to act unbothered by it all. People die, you just have to get over it. Simple as those words were, Stefan had no reason to believe his father believed in any of that. Death seemed to have a strong impact on him because he never forgot or let go of any of those that died, whether it was his father and mother, Lyanna Stark, and now Lord Arin. His father grieved in the worst ways for them. There's something else we need to talk about, Steph. He had hoped that he would be able to leave now, but he was sorely mistaken. What is it? Halfway curious and halfway wanting to speed this along, Stefan tried to remain interested in what his father had to say. It seems you've grown quite popular. Confused, Stefan bowed his brows with a frown. After hearing that I let your sister marry Ned's boy and engaged Joff to his daughter, many lords are curious if you are ready to marry yourself. Ah, so that's what all those letters were about. Lords trying to give him sweet words so that he could take a chance to glance at their daughters. Stefan knew he couldn't remain unmarried, especially since he was the crown prince. His marriage was more imminent than both Joffrey and Cassandra's, but they were married and engaged before he was. Whether I'm ready or not doesn't really matter, now does it? Robert laughed at his question, downing more of his wine after his loud outburst. How could marriage fit into his plots of revenge? It would ruin it most likely. With a wife at his side, he couldn't abandon her on a daily basis to make sure his mother and uncle would suffer for the consequences of their actions. Sinking into the seat, Stefan knew he had to act interested. If he kept putting the marriage off, rumors would circulate that he slighted many of the lords that offered their daughters or that he enjoyed men in his bed like it was implied his uncle Renly did. He couldn't feed into either rumor, but he also didn't need a woman he barely knew ruining things. How long could he hold this off without upsetting anyone? Now that another obstacle was before him, Stefan didn't feel as confident as he did after the boat docked. Ned. It was a whole week since Prince Stefan returned and the boy had been strangely quiet. He roamed the castle halls like any other prince would, like he had seen Joffrey do, but Ned thought the boy would be much more harder to find as of lately. With his suspicions, he thought the boy would give chase, make his trails without any breadcrumbs, but he had been docile. After Robert's own concerns with his son's actions, it seemed as if Stefan knew he had to wait it out. And when he finally thought to do what Ned knew he intended, he would make sure that Jory would be the one to follow him. It could have been that with the reasons of night coming all this way from all over parts of the realm for this tourney, he was keeping himself quiet. Robert was in a rush to have the boy a proper wife, a woman who would undoubtedly be a queen in the future. Stefan didn't seem enthused about it at all, reminding Ned when he was suddenly told he had to marry Catelyn upon the death of Brandon. He was not ready, he did not want Catelyn then, but he was happy things worked out the way they did. Whenever he felt that happiness, the guilt came along with it due to the fact that Catelyn came with the cost of losing Brandon. What is your intrigue with Prince Stefan, my lord? Jory finally asked. He had done his orders without question, but now he thought it time that he knew why Ned kept an eye on the boy. He either knows something or is trying to know of something in particular. Of that he was sure, and whatever it is, I see it as no small matter. Jory gave a nod, coming to understand where Ned was coming from. And you think he would keep it secret from you? I have no idea if Stefan trusts me or no. Ned drew in his eyebrows, contemplating it all. Whatever it was, it had something to do with Jon Arryn, of that Ned was sure of. If the boy was investigating his death, then that means he was aware that the man died in a questionable manner. I have no reason to believe that he is hiding it from me purposely. I think he is unsure of how severe it is. His eyes gazed back to the tome that lied on the surface of the table before him, the lineage and histories of the great houses of the Seven Kingdoms, with descriptions of many high lords and noble ladies and their children, by Grand Maester Malian. This was the very book that Jonarin asked for, and Jonarin never did anything without reasons. When Prince Stefan went to see Lord Stannis, you could have informed him that you want to summon him back from Dragonstone. Jory mentioned, why didn't you? I was not ready to resort to that yet. The Hand replied, Stefan would have questions and Lord Stannis would not like to see his nephew used. I also want a better notion of what this all about and see where the both of them stand. Without a moment's haste, he begun his orders. Bring me my doublet, if you would. The grey, with the direwolf sigil. I want this armorer to know who I am. It might make him more forthcoming. Compliantly, Jory had ambled his way to the wardrobe. He knew that Ned was ready to speak of the boy that had been around to tell the tale of the places Jon and Stannis had gone off to. He had to believe the stable boy's words for it. Ned could hardly trust half of what anyone said here anyway. Stefan. The first place on the list was the armory, which didn't seem out of the norm. Due to his status, Stefan made sure that when he slipped away from the sights of his Lannister guards and into the crowd, he wore a cloak that could shield half his face. It gave him the proper shadow of mystery. The blonde mane was too noticeable, and silver was meant to stay in his bedchambers until he returned. The lion was already irate for being left behind when he went to Dragonstone, and now his master left him again. It would take some time to make Silver forgive him, but Stefan would try his hardest when he returned. He tilted his head back, bunching the material to keep his hood from slipping back so he could make sure that he was on the right path. The armory was written to be located in a large house at the top of the Street of Steel. Stefan knew King's Landing pretty well considering how sheltered he had been. He studied the maps well, and his very few walks with Tyrion served to come to the forefront of his memory good enough. Whenever his eyes came across a child barefoot or hungry, his hands would twitch. He desperately wanted to reach into his currency pouch and give them coins, but it would draw attention if he gave them gold dragons. Gold dragons were the only thing he carried. What would a prince need of silver or coppers? When a few of the children stopped at the cart filled with rows of fruit, Stefan knew he couldn't keep walking. The good in him just couldn't stand to see a child hungry, even at the cost of exposing his identity. Reaching into his pockets, he pulled out 3 gold dragons. I'm buying fruit for all the children here. Let them have as many as they want and take as much as they want at the price of 3 gold dragons. He handed the merchant the money, quickly, who blinked madly at the sight of the expensive coins as the children eagerly began swiping all the coins worth. With a faster pace, he bobbed and weaved through the crowd, trying to hide himself again. The merchant was still calling out to him, out of thanks or curiosity. Stefan would never know now, but just knowing those children didn't starve was just enough. Hopefully, they could share their fruits with other children or other hungry members of their family. He knew poverty was horrible here, but Stefan didn't know it was to this extreme. The sight of hungry, half-clothed children and adults without homes or even a loaf of bread was startling. How much work had to be done here? He couldn't save everyone, but he was willing to save whoever he could. The sounds of hammers hitting steel began to ring in his ears. The air was smoky and muggy, making his eyes sting as he constantly tried to blink it all away. He knew he was close as he began to see the open forges and many men buying chainmail and wagons of swords and other weapons going up and down the narrow road. Sales upon sales were shouted, almost making him wish he could tell them shut up, since a few had yelled for the fantastic sales of their arms right into his ear. They were doing their job, he reasoned, but he wished it wasn't at the expense of nearly making him deaf. The hill was making him tired since it felt so never-ending, and from what he could tell, the man he was looking for was right at the very top of it. The house was bigger than he thought it would be and made of what looked to be timber and plaster. The upper stories giving the streets a shadow to block anyone from the hot sun if they wanted shade. Swallowing down whatever fear that trickled up his throat, Stefan pushed open the doors and was immediately met with a serving girl. She had a chalice in one hand and a pitcher of wine in the other. Upon seeing him, she looked surprised and even a little disappointed. Her eyes immediately looked to her right, meeting the gaze of the man that seemed to be the master armorer who came rushing his way through. He also shared the same disappointed look, but his anger was starting to well up in his eyes before he made a vicious frown. "Who are you and what are you doing here?" he questioned immediately, The Hand is on his way, I'm offering my services to no one else. The Hand. Stefan repeated, unaware that Ned Stark was making his way here as well. How did he know to come here? Did he figure something out while Stefan was trying to shake off any eyes that were awaiting for his next move? Should he reveal himself before he was forced out? Stefan was unsure of the next step to take. He was left contemplated on what to do next. Yes, the Lord Hand as I just said. The master stressed, if you aren't here to buy anything then go. You don't look as if you have the coins to even touch any of my arms. Insulted and infuriated, Stefan ripped his hood back so quick that he barely had time to blink. I am Prince Stefan Baratheon, Crown Prince of the Iron Throne. I demand you show me proper respect or I'll bring your head before a sword and punish your insolence myself. The serving girl and her master brought themselves down to their knees. She dropped the pitcher of wine and the chalice, spilling summer wine onto the floor and letting pool close to his feet. My prince, I. Now they stuttered, now they were pleading for their lives and forgiveness for their rude behavior. It was a shame that any other person would have been treated that way based on how they were dressed. No wonder the poor hated the rich, look at how they were treated. He raised his hand, ordering them to rise without giving them any verbal orders. The master armorer nearly fell, making himself stand again, and the girl kept her head down, unable to meet his blue eyes. My prince, may I clean this mess I have made? Surely, such a pigsty would dissatisfy you. You think I care whether this place is clean or not after how I was spoken to? Stefan hadn't meant to frighten the girl again, his voice was loud in his annoyance. Go on with your duty, I don't care. He dismissed her, his eyes narrowing at the master, who was twiddling his thumbs now. I have questions and I want answers, and I will want you to behave as if I was never here. You will not tell the Hand I came, understood? The forger nodded his head quickly. Yes, my prince. My uncle and Lord Orin came here before. Looking around at the many weapons, costly as Stefan knew them to be, on the walls as well as the many armors of shades and sizes. The craftsmanship was something he could admire even in his anger. Tell me, when they entered your shop, what did they ask you? Perhaps, my prince, you may want to sit and have some wine. Surely, standing while talking, Stefan's eyebrows pulled down together, eyes thinning in a heated glare as his lips were tightly closed. I suppose not. Quickly clearing his throat and tugging his collar, the master armorer knew it wiser to not try to placate him without answers. They asked to see the boy, so I took them back to the forge. His anger faltered, confusion taking its place. Stefan rose a brow. The boy. Who is this boy? I want to see him. Yes, my prince. With a nod, he began his walk, allowing Stefan enough time to follow him closely. They had gone out a rear door, across a narrow yard, and back to what looked to be a cavernous stone barn where all the work was done. Stefan watched him as he opened the door. The heat of hot air came flowing out like when you stood in front of an oven. Stefan winced, still caught off guard by it, and squinted as he followed the man inside the forge. Many men were inside and all of them looked at him with question, never minding their work to give him some of their attention. They were probably wondering what he wanted and why the master armorer had brought him back here. None of them knew who he was, which made Stefan wonder if the cloak really made much sense outside after all. Who would think the Crown Prince would walk down the street in broad daylight? They kept going right into the bellows with the rest of the boy apprentices. They wore no shirts, possibly due to the heat of the fire to shape the armor and weapons. One boy in particular stood out. He looked to be of the same age as Stefan and was the one that the master armorer had stood directly in front of. This is. He turned to him, eyes asking if he should tell the boy who he was. Stefan shook his head. No need to know my name. I want to ask you a few questions and leave you to your work when done. The boy looked at him, bearing the same eyes that reminded Stefan of his own. His hair was an inky black as well as an unkempt mess. Surely, nobody cared how they looked back here. They were making weapons and armor, not wearing them like the lords. This is Gendry. Gendry. A name he never heard before, but Stefan knew he must remember it. Show him that helmet you made. Gendry didn't look all too eager. In fact, he looked almost embarrassed as he led them towards his bench, and allowed Stefan to see the steel helm that happened to be shaped like the head of a bull. It was made fantastically, forged from pure and raw steel. Stefan never saw armor made like that before. He was more than impressed. "You made this?" The Crown Prince couldn't help but ask, still in awe. "Would it be too much if I would pay for you to make me a helm in the fashion of a stag?" Gendry looked at him, surprised almost, before a smile graced his features. "I could do that. I'll be looking forward to it." Stefan returned him a small smile of his own. "I know this may seem strange to you, me coming here and asking to see you, but I am here on important matters. I was told my Lord Stannis and Lord Arryn came to see you. Could you inform of what you discussed with either one of them?" "Lord Arryn?" The dark-haired boy began. "All he did was ask me questions." "I suppose you want to know the questions?" Stefan nodded in reply. "He asked how I was I treated well, and if I liked the work. Stuff about my mother too. Who she was and what she looked like and all." Furrowing his brows, he wondered what all of this had meant. Why was Lord Arryn so curious about this boy's life? Who was he? "Did you answer his questions?" "I told him that my mother died when I was little. She had yellow hair, and sometimes she used to sing to me, I remember. She worked in an alehouse." Crossing his arms, Stefan began to ponder all of this information. "And Lord Stannis asked nothing of you? The bald, scary one, I mean?" Gendry shook his head. His blue eyes stared into Gendry's own again, wondering why his eyes looked so similar to his. Blue eyes were common, but Stefan's own was known as the Baratheon blue. Those eyes could not be duplicated if you weren't a Baratheon. So why did he have them? Unless... He froze, right there. Stefan was aware of Maya and Edric, and to find out his father had made another bastard, one as old as he. No, Stefan didn't want to believe it. How could he not? His father hoard for days, years, and all hours. Why did it feel so impossible right now? Maybe because he didn't want to believe that nearly in the same month Cassandra and himself were conceived, he made another child in his newly marriage. He cheated that quickly. But why did Lord Arryn and Stannis seek him out? His uncle's words came floating back in his head. "You won't be surprised of all of what you'll find. It is what it all adds up to, that will, my nephew." He was right. He shouldn't have been shocked about this, but what would all of this lead up to? Was he on a quest to find each bastard that his father made? Schooling his face back to a neutral look, he looked at the Master Armor and then back at Gendry. "The Hand will come and he will ask the same questions of you. Do not mention me, pretend as if I never came." Confused, Gendry furrowed his brows but nodded, knowing he had no choice but to accept it. "I will come to find you again, Gendry." "You?" Another brother, one that he couldn't even properly meet at that. A brother the same age as he, with no mother and forced to be without family, working for this rude man. Stefan would have loved to see how his mother behaved if he brought Gendry to court, forcing them all to acknowledge him. "You take care." But why did Lord Arryn and Stannis seek him out? His uncle's words came floating back in his head. "You won't be surprised of all of what you'll find. It is what it all adds up to, that will, my nephew." He was right. He shouldn't have been shocked about this, but what would all of this lead up to? Was he on a quest to find each bastard that his father made? Schooling his face back to a neutral look, he looked at the Master Armor and then back at Gendry. "The Hand will come and he will ask the same questions of you. Do not mention me, pretend as if I never came." Confused, Gendry furrowed his brows but nodded, knowing he had no choice but to accept it. "I will come to find you again, Gendry." "You?" Another brother, one that he couldn't even properly meet at that. A brother the same age as he, with no mother and forced to be without family, working for this rude man. Stefan would have loved to see how his mother behaved if he brought Gendry to court, forcing them all to acknowledge him. "You take care." With a nod, Stefan decided to go to the next location. The next place happened to be a brothel, and one that did not belong to Littlefinger. It was run by a dark-skinned, beautiful woman from the Summer Isles. It took some convincing, heavy convincing, to tell her he was here on an important task. With some conversations, some more convincing, he was finally led to who his uncle wanted him to find. Before him, in one of the many rooms of the pleasure establishment, he was face to face with a young girl that had to be years younger than him and Cassandra. It didn't surprise him, but it disgusted him. She had to at least been around Sansa's age. In her arms was a baby, which Stefan knew had to be another one of his father's bastards, a half-sibling that Stefan never even knew again. The young mother had hair that was a light red and many freckles on her face, mostly across the bridge of her button nose. She was patting the small back of the infant, acting like a mother when she shouldn't have been one at her tender age. Just seeing it made him feel pitiful because she had deserved something much better than all of this. She finally noticed him, standing there with sad eyes as he looked the baby with a mop of black hair on its head. "I'm only going to sing her to sleep, then I can tend to you, sir." "There is no need for that." Stefan raised his hand to dismiss any idea that he came to lay with her. "I only want you to answer my question." Puzzled, the girl looked at him as if he had said something obscene. "Is the child in your arms the bastard of King Robert Baratheon?" She was frightened, almost instantly, clutching her child close like he was some madman. "Please, please don't harm her." It was natural reaction, still he didn't expect it. Stefan never had anyone so afraid him, especially a woman. "I'm not going to harm you or the little one." He tried to ease her, speaking as calmly as he could with his hands out to show he did not any weapons in them. "I am Prince Stefan, Crown Prince of the Iron Throne. The child you hold there is my little sister." The words sounded so unbelievable leaving him, but the girl managed to calm and then began try to quickly apologize. She even went as far as trying to bend her knee before him. Stefan kept her still by pulling her lightly up by the arm. "No need for that." Relieved that everything had become peaceful, he looked down at his half-sibling. Can I hold her?" Hesitant, the young girl looked down at her baby and then back at Stefan. A smile soon came across her face before she carefully placed the baby in his arms, allowing him to cradle her. "Her name is Barra." It was an interesting name. He couldn't question it, and he didn't want to after seeing Barra's chubby face. Stefan could see how much his father was in this baby's looks, especially since her features reminded him of Cassandra almost immediately. Her hair was curly, sticking close to her head, but her eyes were blue just like his. "I love your father, I really do." The girl told him, "He's always been good to me and surely, you'll tell him of Barra, won't you?" Her words stung him, almost immediately as they were said. This girl, near Sansa in age, had laid and loved his father and bore him a bastard girl. How much more could his family infuriate him? How much more did he have to hate them all? Barra, Gendry. They suffered because of his father's lack of responsibility. And if his mother had any say, she'd harm them if she thought they posed as any threat. "Tell you what, how about I take you and Barra to a safer place? You're not safe here and neither is Barra. I'll buy you a home and when it is safe, you can let Barra meet her father." "Really, my prince? You would really do that?" Her eyes were brimming with tears, unable to believe that someone would give her this kindness. That at least someone was willing to go out of their way to protect her and this little life. "I mean it." Stefan looked down at his baby sister, trying not to feel rage for his father all over again. "I will have men escort you to a proper home and you can raise Barra in peace." Stefan. Today was the first day Hans tourney. Stefan wanted to skip it, he wasn't in the mood for jousting, but he knew he had to keep up with appearances. Tourneys weren't just about fighting. Tourneys could change the future of things by the flow of conversations due to the congregation of lords and ladies from all over, West AOC and foreign. The flow of conversations, for Stefan particularly, would be about joining his family's hand with another through marriage. His father warned him that many lords had came to see him with their daughters in tow. This was the ripe time to find a girl befitting for a wife and future queen before his father took matters in his own hands, choosing someone he thought fit based on the minimalist of qualities. The thought of his father choosing him a wife sickened him, especially knowing that he found young girls at the tender age of Sansa Stark worth bedding. Due to the special essence of this day and days to come, he would not ignore his Lannister colors as usually did. Today, he would combine both houses evenly. The reason being was that he could not show any sort of upset balance to these lords. It might come as a surprise to his mother, to his father even, since he preferred the Baratheon black and green than the Lannister red and gold. The lords could not begin to believe or sense any sort of disruption in their family, even if the rumors were sitting distinctively in their heads, since servants and officers alike liked to speak of the dysfunctional royals. The perfect prince was something he knew he could play well, and he had to fit that role to a T. His doublet was red, golden brocade with designs of leaves and vines of threads made of Mirish silk. His trousers were pitch black without a single wrinkle, his boots golden dyed leather, and resting neatly on his right shoulder was the black half-cape with the crowned stag insignia stitched in golden thread. His coiffure was fashioned the same, swept to the side since he couldn't bother having it brushed back or in a ponytail. He was sure his uncle Jaime was fixing to tell him to cut it since his hair was growing longer for even Stefan's own liking. His hair was going to be the same length as Cassandra and Myrcilla's at this rate. There wasn't much he could do to his hair anyway, since he had to wear the gold and slender coronet, designed with rubies and emeralds, around his brow. As he kindly sent the servants away that helped to dress him, he adjusted his own sleeve before looking at his father's warhammer that was placed with care on his wall. Blacktail or the warhammer? That was the harder decision as he glanced over at Silver, who lounged across his bed in his usual lazy fashion. His back was atop of the blanket, paws in the air as he rolled from his side and onto his back again. The hammer or the sword, Silver? If I keep father's hammer on the wall any longer, he'll wonder why he even gave it to me. Naturally, all he received was something much softer than a roar but closer to a growl. Silver was still quite upset with him. Fine, I shouldn't have asked for your opinion anyway. What does a lion know? Raka or no, you're still just a big cat. No better than Sir Pounce to me. Silver swiped at him, snarl and teeth bared. Stefan couldn't help but to laugh, wondering how the animal knew so well that he was insulting him. A dog would have whined, but Silver bared his teeth and claws to anyone, his master too. Such a hostile thing he was. Silver leaped off the bed, standing under Blacktail as if that was his choice. Stefan's blue eyes glanced at the warhammer briefly, before nodding and deciding to go with the sword as well. Buckling Blacktail around his waist, he gave Silver a quick pet atop of his head. Good choice, Silver. Leaving his chambers, his eyes watched the bumbling movements of servants who were making sure everything was spick and span for those that would be staying in the guest apartments of Maegor's Holdfast. The Crown Prince made sure not to get in any of their way. He knew that the job of a servant was a hefty task in itself already, and they didn't need it to be any harder for them, especially today of all days. His mother and father, he reasoned, should be by the main entrance waiting for all the children to gather before they, together, as a family, make their grand entrance and seat themselves. Stefan was a little earlier than he usually would have been, at least he thought so, seeing only his mother with Tommen and Myrcilla behind her skirts. The two of them looked to be talking about whatever it is they found to be of their current interests. Cersei raised her head at the sound of his boots hitting the marble floors, and her eyes widened a fraction upon the sight of him. Mother. Bowing his head, the golden-haired queen soon took precious steps towards him, her hands coming to gather his own. You look handsome, Stefan. It was like all the fury-embedded tension they held towards each other since they left Winterfell wasn't there or never was. Her anger towards him since the trident seemed to have withered some, at least to Stefan it seemed it did. You're even wearing our family colors. She never claimed the Baratheon family, she was still a Lannister, married or not. Of course. Being civil, he gave her a small smile. Today's my lucky day, isn't it? I'll be looking for a bride. He leaned forward some, a grin slowly revealing itself. A future queen. Her lips dipped down slightly, which seemed like the best and normal reaction. One that he purposely egged on. The sound of the beginnings of his mother moving further away from staying the queen had to be upsetting for her, considering who she was. Who pushed this idea? Her voice was slightly strained, like she was covering up her anger. It was your father, wasn't it? It was. Remaining truthful, he brought her in for a half hug. Surely, I can't be your little boy forever, I've already grown way taller than you. His mother fought not to, but she eventually smiled, her head leaning into him. Do you not want grandchildren? Not at the expense of your happiness, my sweet boy. For some reason, he believed her. Even if his mother had done horrible things, things without morals and left free of the consequences she deserved, Stefan could never deny that she loved him. She does, she always did, but her love could not and would not blind him. No matter how much this little moment reminded him of days when he was blissfully unaware of all the things that came to the light, he could not forget it and move past it without rectifying them. Happiness isn't always a choice you can make. Circia tilted her back to look at him, brows furrowed as she tried to register what he meant by that. Whatever she made out of it, Stefan would probably never know. It might be in his best interest not to know. Tommen sooner wrapped his arms around Silver, pressing his face into the lion's fur. The only time Silver was ever so docile was when he was with Tommen and Myrcella. They were gentle, never insulted him like Stefan did, and played with him when Stefan was far too busy to. If the lion wanted to be spoiled in both food and attention, he knew just the two to look for. "Will Silver be watching the Hand's tourney with us, Steph?" Myrcella asked him, her green eyes gleaming as she looked up at him. "I think Silver might ruffle some feathers." Bending his knees some so that he was at eye level with her, he tilted his head slightly to the right. "Want to see the lords and ladies nearly ready to jump out of their seats and onto their bums from the sight of him?" A mischievous grin came across her face, her hand rubbing Silver's back. "Maybe Tilda," his sister said with feigned innocence. "That would be funny." Tommen cheekily added, "We always make fun of the lords and ladies when they visit. Remember when Cassie said Lady Caron had a horse face and kept neighing whenever she walked by?" The memory was clear as day in their heads, making them laugh almost instantly. Their harmonized laughter didn't last long, they sooner found their laughs dying out and a look of longing coming clear across their faces. Tommen hung his head low. "I miss Cassie," he quickly said, voice soft. "I miss her too, Tom." Placing his hand on his baby brother's head, he called the both of them in. "You know, Cassie misses us too." "How do you know?" Myrcella asked. "Did you send her a raven?" "I did, but she hasn't sent one back yet." A raven from King's Landing to Winterfell wasn't a speedy process, but Stefan understood her disappointment. "Cassie and I are twins," he clarified. "We sometimes share our feelings because we're connected in that special way." Their big, green eyes looked up at him, looking at him for comfort as they tried to adjust the sudden absence of their older sister. "I can tell that she misses the way you stitch her dresses and how you would spend half the day braiding each other's hair. She misses reading Tommen his favorite story, The King o' the Cats, and surprising him with the claw at his favorite part of the story." They started to smile again, relieving him that he managed to mitigate their worries. "She even misses me telling her that her room looks like a storm came through it. But she'll come to visit us one day, and who knows, she might bring us a niece or nephew when she does." His little sister smiled broadly, taking on the happy look she always wears. "I feel better now." Meanwhile, Tommen tilted his head with his face contorted into one of puzzlement. "I can't see Cassie with a baby." Stefan could only snort. "Neither can I, but I'm sure she'll be better in caring for babies by that time." Bringing them in for another squeeze, he let them go and stood straight again. From the sounds of it, he heard Joffrey come strutting down the corridor and into the entrance hall. "Father is late again, isn't he?" he said while rolling his green eyes that were so similar to their mother's. His little brother seemed grumpier than usual this morning. Tourneys usually made him happy, he enjoyed the zest and the violence of it all. Perhaps it was his own impatience that irritated him more than the day did. "You know your father." Their mother tried to soothe him, placing her hand on his shoulders to give it a slight squeeze. "He can never show up on time for anything." "Uncle Jamie is going to be in the tourney," Joffrey brought up. "Why is he such a show-off? Didn't he just get unhorsed by that flowery buffoon last time and on my own name-a-day? He's an embarrassment." Stefan quickly averted his eyes, trying his best to keep in his laugh. His mother looked annoyed by Joffrey's comment for reasons clearly known. Sometimes it was entertaining with the way the boy had no problem speaking his mind whatsoever. He just insulted his mother's lover without even knowing. "Do you think Soloras will unhorse Uncle Jamie again?" Stefan decided to join the conversation, fueling his mother's annoyance with the conversation at hand. It was more of a surprise that Stefan was speaking to him, so much so his little brother seemed shocked at first. It was clear Joffrey still harbored some ill feelings for him after what happened at the Trident. They hadn't cooled down enough for him to be just a little above average of what Joffrey considered cordial. Is that a bet? Joffrey inquired. You want to bet on whether Uncle Jaime gets unhorsed? Didn't our father bet with Lord Baelish against Jaime and won? Cersea's face would be stuck like that if she frowned any longer or any deeper. I doubt they'll have to face each other again. If Uncle Jaime loses to him again, I don't think he'll take it very well. With a smirk, Joffrey crossed his arms. You might be right, brother. My hound will be in the tourney and I have every reason to believe he'll win. He'll tear that Knight of Flowers from his charger like a child picks a flower from a garden. But the mountain would also be in this tourney. It sounded like a recipe for a dish named disaster considering the volatile relationship between brothers. I'll put gold dragons to Sandor. Why? Confused, Joffrey wanted to hear the reason behind it. Sandor is quite the fighter and I hear his strength is doubled the amount our horse. Why not choose him? He seems like the wiser pick. Because the stupid hound is afraid of the mountain. His brother explained, every time he looks at him, he's about to soil himself. For valid reasons, the both of them knew that Sandor had every single reason to fear his older brother. Joffrey thought the fear was borderline idiotic. Mainly because he had never had anything worse than a swelling or welt in his life. The slap and their father's few hits that he was eventually protected from were nothing compared to having half of your face put into a fire. His brother was too spoiled and barely knew of true pain. Let's make it official, Steph. I put 50,000 gold dragons on the mountain. Money was never a problem in this household, but that was a lot of coin over a silly bet between them. And what was he to do with that amount of coin? Stefan didn't need it to spend it on anything since he had anything he could have possibly wanted as far as possession go. He could probably throw the coins to a crowd in Flea Bottom. No, that would be dangerous. They would fight for the coins and the last Flea Bottom needed was more brawling. He could ride to the city, properly guarded, and hand out coins. That seemed safer. After seeing how things were in Flea Bottom, that was the least he could do. Also, I demand that you cut your hair. You look more like my older sister than my older brother. Is that really the look you're going for? Deadpanned, the Crown Prince gave his brother a frown. Say something else and I'll encourage Uncle Renly to tell all the lords and ladies how Arya Stark bested you and threw your sword in a river. The embarrassment of that incident was so clearly there. Joffrey practically shook with anger, hands curled into tight fists. Don't you dare. With a saccharine smile, Stefan slightly leaned forward. Oh, I dare, little brother. LLL. Strange was how he found it all to be. Months ago, Stefan wanted to be part of this tourney, using the lance that Uncle Jaime gave him for his name-a-day for jousting specifically. If he wanted to show off, he could arrange to be a mystery knight, but the allure of it all became so dull to him. He felt thousands of eyes watching his every movement, many lords shoved their way towards him in order to speak with him, and his face felt so sore from false smiles that he thought the muscles would become numb by the end of the day. Due to the tourney, Ubber Gold was served, only heightening the costs of this extravagance to a higher degree. It was his favorite wine, the first kind he ever tasted when he was a boy of 7. He fondly remembered his father handing him a cup to drink, just throw it up all in one go. The taste of the expensive wine as of now helped rid himself of all the bubbling rage over the past few months, letting him become a calm-minded boy of his age with just a few sips of its nectar. The red wines and the Tyrells, families by nature, had played their own games with him. Lord Paxter presented his daughter, Desmara, to him before he even took a seat or before Lord Mace could properly tell him hello. Desmara was younger than Stefan by a few months, and took the role of a shy maid upon introductions. She had a lovely voice with hair of deep auburn and eyes that looked as if the blue and grey collided to make an abstract color. What people would notice most about her, however, was her freckles. Pretty in face, Stefan didn't know much of her except from what her father boasted. She could sing and she could dance greater than any bard or any lady in the royal court, her father would say. Cersei did her best to drive the phrase way. She said they would taint all that was right if their bloodlines had been crossed for another time again. Luckily his great-aunt Jenna wasn't around to hear her say that. Stefan wasn't all that enthused anyway, he didn't wish to be any close to the phrase than he already was. Their reputation and their actions before his own eyes had only made his dislike for them even more apparent. You should be in the tourney, Steph. He heard his father say, breaking him out of the fixed concentration he had at absolutely nothing while his uncle Jamie won the round against Lord Bryce Caron. Why sit here and watch? You're young, you joust. It sounded mostly like his father was itching to join the jousting himself, but his weight and his age was making him hesitant. It wasn't the fact that people would treat him different because was their king. I've lost all interest, Stefan admitted, his voice monotone. All of this bores me now. His eyes glanced down at the rackar that laid at his feet. Even Silver seemed unamused by it all. What in seven hells has gotten into you lately? Now Tony's bore you. Whether his father was in the mood to argue or he was actually concerned was something Stefan didn't know. What he did know was that he was not in the mood for this conversation, especially when people were watching them. It sounded rude for him to say he found all of this boring in the first place, but it was his truth and he would not take it back. I've grown, father. That's what happens, isn't it? You don't like or enjoy everything you once did when you were younger. And unaware. Blissful. Ignorant. Stunned or rather confused into silence, his father didn't say anything else. He merely stared at him with his mouth thinned. Stefan brought the chalice to his lips for another sip of wine before he decided to drink no more, even though being drunk and blacking out sounded more fun than watching this. He had to remain of some clear mind before the first day of the tourney ended. Death wasn't out of the norm in tourneys, and yet he didn't expect for Sir Hugh of the Vale to be the one to meet such a gruesome end. He was impaled in the throat by the sharp end of a lance, leaving Stefan to only shake his head and watch the lifeblood practically gush out of the wound like water does out of a fountain. He died in pain, tortuously slow, and the mountain still remained, unscathed. How do people like Gregor manage to keep living? If there were gods, old or new, why did they keep him from meeting life's end or not give him the stranger's embrace, as the worshippers of the faith would say? They carried off his body and a boy came to shuffle the dirt to cover the blood that stained the soil. It was a saddening sight and it reminded him of too much of life itself. Getting anxious, Steph? Sluggishly, he turned his head towards Joffrey. The joust will end soon and both our champions still remain. Great observations, little brother. Please, tell me more of what I haven't already seen with my own eyes. He fought not to smirk at the quick scowl his brother gave him. Don't feel too confident, the joust isn't at its end. The Hound will win. Your confidence is irksome. The same could be said in return, but Stefan kept that to himself. You saw what the mountain did to Sir Hugh and yet you still. Many men have seen what other men can do, and did that deter them? Keeping his posture despite desperately wanting to recline lazily, he tried to keep his princely appearance than the sloppy look of his father. Even Tommen, just a boy, looked more regal than their own parent. He is your hound. Was he not chosen wisely? A look of thought came across Joffrey's face, like he was considering his words. Stefan wasn't told of anything else due to the fact that Joffrey had rather pay attention to the match at hand than this verbal spar. Gregor took down another, even their very own uncle. Watching Renly be unhorsed was dramatic in itself. When he practically flew off his horse with both legs in the air, his head hit the ground just as hard as his body did. He scared most of the crowd since all they heard was a cracking sound, which fortunately had been the antler of his helm that broke off. When Renly got himself to his feet, stumbling as he did so, the crowd cheered for him. Both Stefan and Joffrey looked at one another, not seeing why the crowd was so pleased. Their shared look of confusion and lack of care made them mirror each other almost completely. They'd cheer for anything. He heard his brother mumble. Stupid lot. Chuckling, they watched Renly give the broken tine of his helm to the Hound. He's really milking this, isn't he? And did the crowd have hearts for eyes for him then, even though Sandor threw the golden piece to the group of commons that fought to grasp it? At least some good came out of, even though Stefan was sure someone's eye would be blackened if they had even a quarter of it in their possession. His uncle wanted even more attention to relish in, so he began ceasing the fights without the proper intentions. If you'll excuse me. Having enough with all the theatrics, Stefan stood and tried to quietly slip away. Silver followed him at his heels. His mother already made her leave since she wasn't fond of tourneys herself. How long did she make herself suffer through this until she had enough, Stefan wondered. Sir Barristan was already out of the competition, losing to Jamie of all people. Stefan intended to look for him, searching for the white-haired knight as he walked down the many pavilions by the river. When he finally found him, he was standing outside a tent with his eyes staring at the flaps as if he made no cautions to enter it. Baristan Stefan called his name, giving the man enough time to properly face him. "My prince, have you lost interest in the matches?" There was a smile on the knight's face as if he already knew his answer. "Did you see to what I asked?" His eyes searched around the area, making sure no one was in close quarters. "Are they safe?" "Mijan and Bara are out of the capital as requested, my prince." Relieved, Stefan was glad he didn't have to worry about the two of them for the moment. "You still haven't told me of what we are meant to do concerning Gendry." "I don't know what we should do, but he isn't safe where he is either. If anyone looked at Gendry hard enough, they'd see Robert Baratheon. Now that Ned Stark